On a crisp autumn morning in the quiet town of Ashford, Connecticut, the Whitfields looked like the family you'd envy. The kind of family that belonged in glossy real estate brochures and community newsletters, smiling with that effortless warmth people imagined but rarely found. Michael Whitfield, at 42, had the air of someone who'd figured out life's secret recipe. Always in a neatly pressed shirt, his dark hair perfectly combed, he was the kind of man who remembered your name after meeting you once, who knew exactly when to laugh during small talk, and who never failed to compliment your garden, even if it was full of weeds. Every morning, as the school bus rolled down Hawthorne Drive, Michael would be out front, coffee mug in hand, waving to the kids and trading a cheerful "morning" with passing neighbors. It was almost cinematic, the way sunlight seemed to catch the steam from his mug just so, turning it into a little halo of warmth. His lawn was a point of pride, lush, emerald green, and trimmed with the precision of a golf course fairway. Even the edges were perfect, as though each blade of grass had been individually inspected. If you passed by in the evenings, you might catch him kneeling down with gardening shears, snipping at a stray dandelion like a surgeon removing a tumor. Inside, the family dynamic seemed equally enviable. Claire, 38, was the softer half of the pair, a part-time elementary school teacher with a quiet demeanor that made people lean in when she spoke. Her students adored her for her patience and her way of making even shy kids feel heard. Together, they had 2 children, Emma, 12, a bright, imaginative girl who was always sketching in the margins of her notebooks, and Noah, 9, a bundle of restless energy who could never pass a puddle without jumping into it. Then there was Max, the golden retriever with a coat so glossy it looked like spun gold in the sun, whose entire mission in life seemed to be spreading joy. From the outside, they were the picture of suburban perfection. A white picket fence wrapped the property like a frame around a painting. In spring, tulips bloomed in neat rows along the walkway. In winter, Christmas lights were strung with an architect's precision, glowing softly against fresh snow. But behind the flawless facade, small fissures had begun to form, so small that even those closest to them could barely sense them. It started with whispers, things only the most observant friends noticed. Claire wearing long sleeves in the middle of July, even when the humidity clung to the skin like a second layer. Michael answering questions directed at her, sometimes before she had the chance to open her mouth. The way she would laugh, too quickly, too softly, when neighbors made light-hearted comments about his strict nature. At first, these details were easy to dismiss. People told themselves it was just the Whitfields' dynamic, some couples had their quirks. But quietly, in moments when no one else was watching, Claire's eyes would sometimes drift toward the floor when Michael spoke, her smile lingering just a second too long, like it had been painted on. In November of 2018, the subtle unease began to solidify into something darker. Claire's older sister, Melanie, had been folding laundry on an unremarkable Tuesday evening when her phone buzzed. The caller ID lit up with Claire's name. She didn't pick up right away, her hands were full and the dryer was still running. By the time she reached the phone, it had gone to voicemail. Melanie pressed play. What she heard made her stop breathing. "I need to talk to you, something's wrong. But don't call me back, I'll explain later." The words were quiet, rushed, almost swallowed by the sound of a door creaking in the background. Claire's voice trembled, not the way someone's does when they're sad, but the way it does when every syllable feels dangerous. And then, nothing. Claire never called again. For the next few days, Melanie tried to convince herself it was nothing. Maybe Claire had a bad day at work. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. But that single sentence played in her mind like a looping recording, each replay pulling her deeper into unease. Melanie called. No answer. She texted. Nothing. When she finally reached Claire a week later, her sister's tone was normal. Too normal. The kind of normal that felt rehearsed. She laughed off the voicemail, saying she didn't even remember leaving it. Maybe she'd pocket-dialed. Maybe she'd been overreacting to something silly. But Melanie didn't buy it. Not entirely. She remembered the way their mother used to tell them, growing up, you can hear the truth in someone's pauses. And Claire's pauses, those moments of silence between her sentences, were louder than her words. In Ashford, nothing seemed amiss. The Whitfields still attended every school fundraiser. Michael still stood at the edge of the lawn each morning, waving as buses passed. The family still went to church on Sundays, sitting in the third pew from the front, hands neatly folded. But if you looked closely, closer than most dared, you might notice that Claire's eyes rarely met Michael's anymore. And on some mornings, as the bus pulled away, Michael's wave lingered just a second too long, as if he knew people were watching. That November marked the start of something the town would later struggle to reconcile. Because when the truth about the Whitfields finally came out, it wouldn't just shatter their carefully curated image, it would shake Ashford to its core. January in Ashford was the kind of cold that made the air feel brittle, as if one sharp movement might shatter it. The streets were rimmed with frost, and the early mornings carried that muffled silence that comes after fresh snowfall. On the morning of January 14, 2019, the teacher's lounge at Ashford Elementary buzzed softly with the usual Monday chatter, the scrape of chairs, the hiss of the coffee machine, the shuffle of lesson plans. But one chair stayed empty. Claire Whitfield's. At first, no one thought much of it. Teachers missed work all the time, a bad cold, a sick child, car trouble. But by mid-morning, her absence began to feel strange. Claire was the type who gave notice for everything. A cough, a dentist appointment, even a migraine, she'd send a text, apologizing for the inconvenience. That morning, there had been nothing. No call. No text. No email. Her coworker, Janet Lewis, tried to brush off the unease building in her chest. Still, between classes, she dialed Claire's cell. It rang, then went to voicemail. She tried again later. Same thing. By the end of the day, whispers had started. Had anyone heard from Claire? Did she call out? Was she sick? At the Whitfield home, Michael already had an explanation ready. To the neighbors who saw him outside that evening, bundled in a heavy coat, shoveling the driveway, he explained it casually. She's gone to Maine to visit her mother. Needed a little space. He'd say it with a small, understanding smile, the kind meant to signal that this was private, but not alarming. She's been a bit stressed. You know, anxiety and all that. This'll be good for her. The way he said anxiety, like it was an excuse, not an illness, made some people tilt their heads. But most nodded politely. After all, Michael Whitfield had a reputation for keeping things under control. There was just one problem. Claire's mother, living in a small coastal town in Maine, hadn't spoken to her daughter in months. When Janet's worry deepened into something she couldn't ignore, she quietly reached out to Melanie, Claire's sister. The two compared notes, neither had heard from Claire in days. Then weeks. And the story Michael was telling them didn't line up. By January 20th, the family had had enough. Melanie filed a missing person report. That Sunday afternoon, 2 uniformed officers arrived at the Whitfield home. The house looked postcard perfect in the pale winter sunlight, but inside, the air felt different. Michael answered the door promptly, his expression polite, almost rehearsed. "Yes, officers, I've been expecting you," he said, ushering them into the living room. He spoke in calm, measured sentences. Claire had been overwhelmed, burnt out. She'd left of her own accord. She just needed time alone. And, he added, she'd be mortified if the police made a big deal out of it. The more he talked, the more it sounded like a prepared speech. Then one of the officers noticed it, a faint, sour odor drifting in from somewhere beyond the living room. When they followed it, they found themselves in the garage. The smell was stronger here, mingling with the cold air and the faint hum of a chest freezer in the corner. Michael caught them looking. "Ah, that," he said with a dismissive wave. I've been meaning to clean it out. Some old meat went bad. You know how it is." He even chuckled softly, as though it were an embarrassing but harmless domestic oversight. The officers exchanged a glance. They didn't have probable cause to push further, but they weren't convinced. Back inside, as they continued their questions, another red flag emerged. Michael's story about the night Claire supposedly left kept shifting. In one version, she'd packed an overnight bag and kissed the kids goodbye while they were still awake. In another, she'd left after they were asleep, slipping out without a word. Sometimes he said she'd taken her car. Other times, he said she'd called for a ride. The changes were subtle, but in police work, subtlety matters. They left without making an arrest, but as they pulled away, one of the officers made a quiet note in the report. Odor in garage. Inconsistent statements. Recommend follow-up. From that moment, the Whitfield home, once the neighborhood's picture of stability, became a silent focal point of suspicion. Neighbors who used to wave now lingered at their windows, watching. The children's laughter in the yard seemed less frequent. Michael's waves, once friendly, now felt like a performance. And in the garage, that faint, sour smell continued to linger. 2 weeks after Claire Whitfield was officially reported missing, the investigation had reached that frustrating stage detectives dread: too many questions, not enough answers. Leads had been chased down and gone cold. Tips from the public fizzled out. And Michael Whitfield's calm, unwavering story still didn't sit right. Then, a break came, not from a witness, not from a confession, but from technology. Police had subpoenaed Claire's phone records, combing through call logs, text histories, and the all-important cell tower data. When the report came back, one detail glared like a beacon. Claire's phone had last pinged near the Whitfield home, not in Maine, not on the interstate, not anywhere close to where Michael claimed she had gone, but right there, within a few hundred yards of the neat white house on Hawthorne Drive. Even more damning, that ping occurred hours after Michael said she had left. That was enough for a judge. Armed with a search warrant, investigators returned to the Whitfield home, this time, not for polite conversation. The day was cold and gray, the kind of sky that made colors look washed out, and the street outside the Whitfields was lined with unmarked vehicles. Detectives moved with quiet precision, photographing every room before touching a thing. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, holding their breath. Inside, they started with the obvious: bedrooms, closets, bathrooms, but quickly moved into the less trafficked corners of the home. When they reached the basement, one detective noticed something peculiar along the back wall. The basement was half finished, one side concrete and storage, the other side carpeted, with beige walls and a few forgotten pieces of furniture. But along the far wall, behind a stack of plastic storage bins, there were sections of drywall that looked different. The paint was a shade too fresh. The seams too crisp. And when they tapped it, the sound was off, hollow, with an irregular echo. The lead investigator crouched down, running his fingers along the wall. The patching was recent. Very recent. With permission from the warrant, they cut into the drywall. Behind it, a narrow hidden alcove emerged. Inside, the space was small, maybe 3 feet deep, just enough for storage. Dust hung in the air as the beam from a flashlight swept across its contents. A purse. Not just any purse, Claire's purse. Inside it, her ID, credit cards, and driver's license, all neatly tucked away. Next to it, a set of clothes folded with care: jeans, a soft blue sweater, undergarments, as if prepared for a trip she never took. And then, a small notebook. The notebook's cover was worn, the edges slightly curled. Inside, the handwriting was unmistakably Claire's, neat, deliberate, and painfully detailed. Entry after entry documented months of physical and emotional abuse. Times and dates. Arguments that escalated into shouting. Shouting that escalated into something worse. Each page ended with the same haunting sign-off: Just in case something happens to me." The room went silent. Detectives glanced at each other, each understanding what they just found, not evidence of her death, but a chilling breadcrumb trail she had left behind, like she'd known this day might come. But there was one thing missing. Claire. They searched the rest of the house, the attic, the garage, the shed out back. Every square foot of the property was combed through, photographed, and logged. And yet, when the search concluded, there was no body. No sign of where she had gone, or been taken. The discovery in the basement deepened the mystery. If Claire had left voluntarily, why would she leave behind her purse? Her ID? Her clothes? And why, above all, would she leave a notebook that read like a final warning? When the team packed up that evening, the air outside felt heavier, as though the street itself was holding its breath. The case had shifted from a missing person to something darker. They had evidence. They had motive. They had suspicion. But until they found Claire, the truth was still out there, somewhere. In late January, the investigation into Claire Whitfield's disappearance had stalled again, not for lack of effort, but because the trail seemed to have gone cold. The search warrant had uncovered disturbing evidence in the basement, but without a body, prosecutors knew they were still working with a puzzle missing its most crucial piece. Then, the break came. It started with a phone call to the Ashford Police Department's tip line. The caller was a delivery driver from a regional appliance company. His voice was casual at first, but grew more urgent as he explained what he remembered. Early in January, right after New Year's, maybe the 3rd or 4th, he'd been dispatched to the Whitfield home to drop off a large, industrial-grade chest freezer. Michael Whitfield had met him in the driveway, waving him toward the garage. He'd been unusually specific about where he wanted it placed, against the back wall, near the outlet. And unlike most customers, he paid in cash. Crisp bills. No receipt requested. The driver remembered it clearly because, as he loaded the dolly back into the truck, Michael had said something odd. "This thing'll be sealed up tight. No kids messing around with it." At the time, it had seemed like an offhand remark. But in light of the news coverage about Claire, it suddenly felt different. Investigators took the tip seriously. On a frigid morning, they returned to the Whitfield home, this time in full force. Detectives, evidence techs, and uniformed officers poured into the driveway, their breath visible in the icy air. In the garage, there it was, the freezer. A hulking white rectangle, positioned exactly where the delivery driver had said. When officers tried to lift the lid, it wouldn't budge. The freezer had been bolted shut. A crowbar was brought in. The sound of metal groaning under force echoed through the garage. Finally, the bolts gave way. The lid creaked open, releasing a rush of cold air, and something else. Inside, wrapped in layer upon layer of heavy contractor plastic and bound with duct tape, was the unmistakable outline of a human form. The garage went silent. Even the hum of the freezer seemed louder in that moment. Detectives exchanged glances. This was no longer a missing person case. This was a homicide. The body was transported under heavy security to the medical examiner's office. The examination confirmed what investigators feared: it was Claire. She had suffered blunt force trauma to the head. The blow was fatal. Based on decomposition and body temperature, her death was estimated to have occurred on January 13th, the night before Michael had told friends, neighbors, and police that she'd left for Maine. With the body recovered, investigators began connecting the dots, and the picture that emerged was devastating. Claire's notebook, discovered in the basement alcove, became the emotional center of the case. Every page documented abuse, escalating over time. Then came the text messages to her sister, careful, coded warnings that hinted she was planning to leave. And the financial records, quietly obtained by subpoena, told their own story. In the weeks before Claire's disappearance, Michael had begun draining the couple's joint accounts, transferring the money into an account solely in his name. The timeline was painfully clear. Claire had been preparing to escape. Michael had found out. Prosecutors would later say it was premeditated, the purchase of the industrial freezer, the careful concealment, the shifting alibis. But in that moment, as officers processed the Whitfield garage, the focus was on one thing: preserving every scrap of evidence that would help tell Claire's story in court. Because Claire had done everything she could to warn the world, in her diary, in her texts, in the quiet courage of documenting her abuse, just in case something happens to me. Now, the world was finally listening. The trial of Michael Whitfield began almost exactly 1 year after the discovery in his garage. By then, the case had become a small-town obsession, not just in Ashford, but across Connecticut. Local news crews set up outside the courthouse every morning. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Rows of wooden benches creaked under the weight of neighbors, friends, and former co-workers, people who had once waved to Michael from across the street, shared meals with him at school fundraisers, or stood shoulder to shoulder with him in the pews on Sunday mornings. They came to see for themselves the man who, according to prosecutors, had murdered his wife, hidden her in a freezer, and carried on life as if nothing had happened. The prosecution's case was meticulous. They didn't just present evidence, they told a story. A story of a man obsessed with control. A man who valued the appearance of perfection above the reality of his marriage. A man who, when faced with the prospect of losing half his assets and the carefully cultivated image of his life, chose violence over vulnerability. The freezer delivery records. The bolted lid. The diary entries, projected onto a massive courtroom screen for the jury to see. And finally, the medical examiner's testimony, the blunt force trauma, the estimated time of death, the impossibility of Michael's version of events. Through it all, Michael sat motionless. No flinch when the freezer photos were shown. No change in expression when the prosecutor read aloud from Claire's final diary entries, words written in her own hand, her own ink, like whispers from the grave. When the defense tried to paint Claire as unstable, the jury's eyes flickered toward the gallery, where her sister Melanie sat with Emma and Noah, the children's small hands tucked inside hers. The attempt fell flat. After just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The foreperson's voice was steady as they read the verdict. Guilty of murder in the first degree. Michael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That was the only reaction he gave. Sentencing came quickly. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. There would be no second chance, no appeal for sympathy. The man who had once been the smiling, waving neighbor on Hawthorne Drive would spend the rest of his days behind bars. Emma and Noah were placed in the care of Claire's sister Melanie. The children's lives would never be the same, their home, their parents, their sense of safety all gone in one violent act. But Melanie promised them a home filled with honesty and love, the kind of love Claire had always tried to give. In the courtroom's final moments, the prosecutor placed one last image on the screen. It was a scan of the last page of Claire's diary, the page she had signed just days before her death. In neat handwriting, she had left behind words that now echoed through the silence of the room. If you're seeing this, I didn't make it out. Tell my children I love them more than anything. Some jurors wiped their eyes. Others stared at the floor. And outside, in the brittle winter air, the people of Ashford left the courthouse forever changed, not just by the horror of what had happened behind the Whitfield's perfect facade, but by the voice of a woman who had tried, in every way she could, to make sure her truth would one day be heard. The hospital halls always smelled faintly of disinfectant, a sharp, sterile tang that clung to the air no matter the hour. It was the kind of smell that burned in your nostrils for a moment, then became background noise, like the low hum of fluorescent lights or the distant hiss of oxygen tanks. To visitors, that scent was reassuring. A promise of cleanliness. Safety. But for those who worked here, it was a constant reminder. That beneath the fresh linen and white walls, life and death walked side by side in these corridors, and they weren't always polite enough to knock before entering. At the center of it all was Rebecca Hall. She was 37 years old. Senior nurse. 10 years on the job. Her colleagues described her the same way every time. Calm under pressure. Unshakable. She has this presence about her. Like no matter how bad things get, she's in control. It wasn't just her competence. Rebecca had an almost unnerving ability to comfort patients in their final hours. Families loved her. Doctors trusted her without hesitation. She was the nurse you wanted by your side if things turned bad. The one who would hold your hand, tell you it was going to be okay, even when it wasn't. But behind that warm smile was a secret. One that had been hiding in plain sight. Over the past 5 years, the mortality rate in her ward had quietly doubled. No alarms were raised. No emergency meetings called. Because the deaths never looked suspicious. Not at first. They came as rapid declines. Patients who, just hours earlier, were stable. Alert. Even cracking jokes with their families. And then, gone. It was the kind of thing that made even seasoned doctors shake their heads, staring at a chart they couldn't explain. Sometimes, they'd say, medicine just can't explain it. They were wrong. Rebecca's day always started the same way. She arrived 15 minutes early, never late, never rushing. The kind of punctuality that made supervisors adore her. She'd change into her crisp scrubs, tuck a few stray strands of hair behind her ear, and take a slow walk down the ward before the official shift change. It wasn't just habit. It was ritual. She'd scan each patient. Not just their charts, but them. Their breathing. Their posture. The subtle twitch of discomfort when a monitor beeped. She noticed things other nurses missed, or didn't think mattered. By the time the day shift clocked in, Rebecca already knew who was doing well, and who wasn't. Or rather, who wouldn't. It all began, at least on paper, with a man named Thomas Avery. 72 years old. Recovering from a mild heart attack. He was on track to be discharged in a week. No complications. No red flags. But on the third night of his stay, something changed. The night nurse, a new hire, found him struggling to breathe just after 3 a.m. His blood pressure plummeted, his oxygen saturation crashed. Code Blue was called. By the time the crash team arrived, Rebecca was already at his bedside. She was holding his hand. Whispering something no one else could hear. He died minutes later. The official report called it sudden cardiac arrest. Unpredictable. Unpreventable. But it wasn't the last time a patient in Rebecca's care would unexpectedly decline. Over the next year, it happened again. And again. Different ages. Different conditions. Some were post-op recoveries. Some were simply in for observation. But the pattern was the same, stable one moment, spiraling the next. It was subtle enough to escape notice. In a hospital, people die. It's not unusual. But statistics don't lie, and the numbers in her ward were starting to whisper. No one was listening. Not yet. If you'd met Rebecca outside the hospital, you'd never guess she spent her nights surrounded by death. Off the clock, she was quiet but charming. She liked strong coffee, long walks, and old jazz records. She had a tiny apartment filled with neatly stacked books, none of them medical. Crime novels. Historical biographies. She had no spouse. No children. A few acquaintances, but no one who could say they truly knew her. She liked it that way. The less people knew, the harder it was for them to see the cracks. One thing Rebecca excelled at, beyond her clinical skills, was reading people. She knew how to talk to grieving families, when to offer a hug, when to stand quietly and let them cry. She could disarm suspicion with nothing more than a tilted head and a soft, "I'm so sorry." It was that same skill that kept questions at bay for so long. No one questioned why she was often the one in the room when a patient took their last breath. No one asked why she volunteered for the difficult cases. No one noticed how often she stayed just a little later than her shift required. But someone would. And when they did, everything Rebecca had built would start to unravel. The thing about secrets is, they don't rot in the dark forever. Eventually, something, or someone, drags them into the light. For Rebecca Hall, that moment was closer than anyone realized. And when it came, it wouldn't just reveal the truth about the deaths in her ward. It would reveal the truth about her. The first person to notice something was a junior nurse named Carla Mendoza. Carla was 25. Fresh out of nursing school. The kind of nurse who still triple-checked every medication label, who carried a small notepad in her pocket and wrote down reminders in neat, blocky handwriting. She admired Rebecca Hall. Everyone did. Rebecca had been the one to guide her through her first week on the ward, steadying her trembling hands when she'd struggled to start in 4 on a dehydrated patient. She had a way of making you feel safe, even when you had no idea what you were doing. But admiration can be a dangerous thing. Because it makes you hesitate before you trust your own instincts. It started as a flicker in the back of Carla's mind. Almost every code blue in the past year had one thing in common. Rebecca was on shift. Not only that, she always seemed to be the one who discovered the patient in distress. She was never far away when the alarms started. Never too busy to rush in. At first, Carla told herself it was just coincidence. Nurses rotated shifts. Things overlapped. It wasn't unusual for the most experienced nurse to be at the front line when something went wrong. But coincidences start to feel heavy when they keep piling up. Then came that week. 3 patients died in just 7 days. All under Rebecca's watch. Carla was there for 2 of them. She remembered the first one, a man in his 60s recovering from pneumonia. She'd checked his vitals during her rounds. Everything was fine. He was even sitting up in bed, asking when he could go home. Less than an hour later, she heard Rebecca calling for help. By the time the crash team arrived, it was too late. The second was worse. A teenage girl. Car accident victim. Multiple fractures, but stable. Her parents had just left for the night when Rebecca walked in to check her 4-line. Minutes later, alarms blared. Carla was one of the first through the door. She saw the girl's face, pale, eyes wide, struggling for breath, before she went limp. That night, Carla didn't sleep. By the time the 3rd patient died, a 75-year-old woman with a broken hip, Carla's unease had grown into something heavier. Quiet dread. Rumors began to ripple through the ward. Some whispered that Rebecca was cursed, a dark cloud hanging over her shifts. Others said she just had bad luck, the kind that made you hope your name wasn't on her patient list. Carla didn't know what to believe. But one young resident, Dr. Ian Patel, wasn't content with rumors. Ian was meticulous. Methodical. He'd been in the hospital long enough to know when something didn't add up. And lately, a lot wasn't adding up. One night, after finishing his rounds, he stayed behind in the staff lounge, a stack of patient files spread across the table. He wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble has a way of finding people who ask the wrong questions. The pattern revealed itself slowly. Case after case. Different patients, different conditions, but one common detail. In the hours before each death, the patient had been given an injection of insulin, or potassium chloride. On paper, these medications weren't unusual. They were stocked on the ward, used for specific cases. But in these cases, there was no reason for them. No doctor's order. No chart entry explaining the dosage. And yet, there they were. Ian felt a knot form in his stomach. It was circumstantial. Flimsy. Without proof, it was only suspicion. And suspicion alone doesn't stop a killer, especially one who knows the system better than anyone else. Someone like Rebecca Hall. But here's the thing about suspicion: once it takes root, it grows. And Ian was about to find out just how dangerous it is to stand between someone like Rebecca and her secrets. It was the night of September 12th when Harold Myers was wheeled into room 412. 64 years old. Retired high school teacher. The kind of man who could make small talk with a stranger in an elevator and have them laughing by the second floor. He'd been admitted for observation after mild chest discomfort. Not an emergency. Just precaution. His tests were coming back clean, his vitals steady. When his wife, Marlene, kissed him goodnight, he was smiling. "You'd better bring me coffee in the morning," he joked, wagging a finger. "That sludge they serve here doesn't count." She promised she would. Rebecca Hall was on the night shift. By now, her presence on the ward was a kind of background fact, like the hum of the lights or the faint scent of disinfectant. No one thought twice about her making her quiet rounds in the small hours, clipboard in hand, her footsteps soft against the linoleum. At 2:13 a.m., Harold's monitor let out a long, piercing tone. Flatline. A sound that has the power to rip sleep from the deepest corner of the human mind. The code team descended within seconds. The air in the room filled with the chaos of CPR, the thump of compressions, the clipped orders, the hiss of the ambu bag forcing air into lungs that wouldn't respond. Rebecca was there already, one hand steady on Harold's shoulder, her face an unreadable mask. When Dr. Ian Patel arrived, his focus was on the patient, until something caught his eye. The sharps container mounted to the wall was nearly empty. Inside, resting at an angle against the red plastic, was a single-use syringe. Not one of Harold's prescribed medications. Not the right gauge. Not the right label. It was subtle. Anyone else might have ignored it. But Ian had been waiting for something like this. The code team kept working. But Harold's heart never came back. 2 days later, the toxicology report landed on Ian's desk. He didn't need to read past the first line. Potassium chloride, massive concentration. Enough to stop a heart cold. The hospital administration moved quickly, and quietly. They contacted law enforcement. Not with panic, but with precision. This wasn't something you confronted head-on. Not with someone like Rebecca Hall. You didn't accuse her. You set a trap. Rebecca, of course, didn't know the walls were beginning to close in. She walked the ward as she always did, calm, unhurried, a faint smile for every patient. She still volunteered for the difficult cases. She still offered to cover for nurses who wanted a break. From the outside, nothing had changed. But beneath the calm, something in the air had shifted. The trap was being set. And soon, Rebecca would step right into it. The trial drew national attention. News vans lined the courthouse steps. Camera flashes lit the marble facade like a storm. Inside, the air buzzed with a mix of anticipation and revulsion. People wanted answers. They wanted to understand how a woman trusted to heal could instead choose to kill. The prosecution wasted no time. From the opening statement, they painted a chilling portrait. Rebecca Hall wasn't a mercy killer. She wasn't ending suffering. She was addicted to the drama. The adrenaline of a code blue. The rush of being the hero in the room. The praise she soaked in when doctors and families thanked her for trying so hard to save a life she had already taken. She didn't just play God. She played the savior. Over days of testimony, survivors took the stand. A middle-aged man described waking in the night to find Rebecca at his bedside, syringe in hand, moments before his body erupted in violent convulsions. A young woman, pale, voice trembling, told the jury how her mother's condition had been improving until Rebecca came in for what she claimed was a routine injection. Her mother was dead within an hour. Then came the families. Fathers. Sisters. Sons. They spoke of loved ones who had been chatting, smiling, even making plans for the future, only to be gone by morning. Some broke down mid-sentence, their grief still raw. Others stared directly at Rebecca, their silence heavier than any words. The defense tried to cast doubt. They blamed clerical errors, system failures, the chaos of hospital life. They hinted at the possibility of other staff being responsible. But the forensic evidence was unrelenting. The hidden camera footage. The medication logs. The toxicology reports. Piece by piece, the picture became impossible to deny. The jury took less than 3 hours to reach a verdict. Multiple counts of murder. Multiple counts of attempted murder. When the foreman read the word guilty, Rebecca didn't flinch. No tears. No visible anger. Just that same faint, unreadable smile she had worn on the ward. The judge sentenced her to life without the possibility of parole. Rebecca Hall would never walk the halls of a hospital again. In the years since, her case has left ripples far beyond that one ward. Hospitals across the country have tightened medication controls, introduced biometric locks, and implemented real-time monitoring of drug withdrawals. Nurses and doctors are trained to spot patterns that might have once slipped through unnoticed. But even with safeguards in place, the haunting question remains. How many angels are still out there? Hidden behind warm smiles. Hiding behind the trust we give to those who are meant to save us. And if there's one thing Rebecca Hall's case taught us, it's that sometimes, the danger isn't in the shadows at all. It's standing right beside you. The trial of Rebecca Hall was unlike anything the county had ever seen. From the moment jury selection began, the courthouse transformed into a kind of stage. Television crews camped out in a permanent line along the sidewalk, their bright lights turning the courthouse steps into a strange mix of red carpet and crime scene. Inside, the hallways smelled faintly of coffee and anxiety. Uniformed deputies moved with a watchful calm. Reporters whispered updates into microphones. Sketch artists sat hunched, pencils dancing across pads as if they were racing to capture history before it slipped away. Rebecca's arrival each morning drew an almost eerie silence. She would step from the holding room in a neatly pressed navy suit, her dark hair pulled into a simple bun. No handcuffs. No shackles. Just that same deliberate, measured walk she had once used when gliding between hospital rooms. To the untrained eye, she could have been a lawyer herself, or a senior administrator, here for a board meeting. But she wasn't. She was here to answer for the deaths of 38 people. The prosecutor, a tall man with a voice built for commanding a room, wasted no time. He painted a vivid picture for the jury, not of a mercy killer, but of a predator. This defendant, he said, pointing toward Rebecca without looking away from the jury, did not act out of compassion. She acted out of vanity. She craved the adrenaline of a medical crisis. She liked being the one who discovered a patient in distress, liked being the center of attention in a room full of doctors and nurses. Every syringe was a stage cue. Every code blue was her spotlight. The words landed heavily. In the gallery, a few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Rebecca sat still, her expression unreadable. Over the next 3 weeks, the courtroom became a revolving door of testimony. There was the young man in his 40s who had survived, barely. I remember waking up, he said, voice low but steady, and seeing her standing there with a needle. I asked what it was for. She just smiled and said, "This will help you rest." A few minutes later, my heart was racing, and then, nothing. I woke up in the ICU 2 days later. They told me I was lucky. A murmur rippled through the jury box. Then came the families. A teenage boy, barely holding himself together, told the court how his grandmother had been laughing with him over a crossword puzzle the night before she died. His voice cracked on the last sentence, and the judge had to call a brief recess so he could regain his composure. Some witnesses were clinical. A toxicologist walked the jury through the lethal effects of potassium chloride, explaining how it could be masked by a sudden cardiac arrest on paper. A hospital pharmacist detailed the audit trail, every missing vial traced back to Rebecca's access card. But the most unsettling testimony came from a behavioral psychologist called by the prosecution. She explained, in calm, measured tones, the phenomenon of hero syndrome, where an individual intentionally creates a crisis in order to be praised for resolving it. This is not about mercy, she told the court. It's about control. About crafting a moment where you are indispensable, and being willing to harm or kill to create that moment. Rebecca's defense team leaned heavily on the chaos of hospital life. They argued that poor record-keeping, high turnover, and overworked staff could create the appearance of wrongdoing where none existed. They pointed to other nurses and doctors who had access to the same medication rooms. They suggested that the hidden camera footage could be misinterpreted, that syringes prepared in advance might be part of a routine emergency protocol. But each point was met with evidence that dismantled it. The logs. The toxicology reports. The fact that so many deaths occurred on Rebecca's shifts, far beyond statistical chance. Against the advice of some, Rebecca testified. Her voice was even. Her gaze steady. She denied every accusation. Said she'd been framed by sloppy procedures and opportunistic investigators. When asked about the patients who'd died, she said softly, "I wish I could have saved them. I did everything I could." It might have swayed some, if not for the prosecutor's final question. "Ms. Hall, can you explain why, on the night of Harold Meyer's death, you withdrew potassium chloride under the name of a patient who wasn't even on the ward?" A pause. Just long enough for the room to feel the weight of it. "I don't recall," she said. And in that pause, the air shifted. After 3 weeks of testimony and 68 exhibits of evidence, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When the foreman read the word "guilty," there was no gasp from Rebecca. No shaking hands. No tears. Just that faint, familiar smile. The judge's sentence was swift, life without the possibility of parole. Rebecca Hall was led away, her steps unhurried, the same calm walk she had used for years in the halls of a hospital. In the years since, the case has left a permanent scar on the medical world. Hospitals nationwide overhauled medication protocols. Access to high-risk drugs now requires dual verification. Real-time audits flag anomalies within minutes. Many facilities began rotating staff to prevent any single person from having unchecked control for extended periods. And yet, for every system, there are ways to exploit it. In quiet conversations at conferences and over coffee in staff rooms, the question still lingers. How many angels are still out there? Smiling. Comforting. Waiting for the next moment to play hero. Because Rebecca Hall's case taught us something chilling. Sometimes, the danger isn't the shadow in the corner. It's the person holding your hand, telling you everything will be all right. In 1993, after the siege at Waco, fear of the government simmered like a slow-boiling kettle across America's fringes. It was an era steeped in paranoia, of black helicopters, secret UN takeovers, and the looming apocalypse. In the dusty corners of gas stations, men in camouflage traded VHS tapes about Ruby Ridge and muttered about ATF agents under their breath. It was in this climate of distrust and prophecy that a man named Elijah Bishop first wandered into Flathead County, Montana. He arrived with nothing but a weathered Bible, a sheepskin coat that looked older than he was, and eyes that didn't quite blink right. Some say he came in through Kalispell on a Greyhound bus. Others say he just walked in out of the woods one cold afternoon, quoting Ezekiel and staring at the sky like it was whispering to him. Elijah had once been a seminary student. Raised in Tennessee by a devout Pentecostal mother and a father who made moonshine in the hills, he'd grown up steeped in both scripture and survival. He was a quiet boy, obsessed with the book of Revelation by the age of 12. Not just the fire and brimstone part, but the coded messages, the visions of beasts and plagues, the seals and the trumpets. By 19, he'd enrolled at a small religious college in Kentucky. But something went wrong. Reports from that time are fuzzy. Some say he had a breakdown. Others say he was expelled after accusing a professor of being a demon in human skin. Whatever the truth, Elijah dropped out, disappeared for several years, and re-emerged, bearded, ragged, but brimming with conviction. Now, he was calling himself Father Enoch. And he said God had spoken to him in the desert. Told him he was chosen. Told him to prepare a remnant. Told him fire was coming. Montana's Flathead Valley is beautiful but brutal. The winters are long and punishing. The mountains, jagged, wild, ancient, seem to press in on the land. There's something eerie about it. Isolated. For people like Elijah, people who wanted to disappear, it was perfect. He set up camp in the Kootenai National Forest, about 30 miles off any main road. The first settlers were just a handful. A Vietnam veteran named Carl Mathers who'd been living in his truck. A single mom named Lorraine who claimed her son had visions. A young couple from Idaho who said they'd left their church because it had been infiltrated by the beast. They pitched tents. Built lean-tos. Started collecting food, firewood, and firearms. Elijah, or rather, Father Enoch, would preach every morning before sunrise. His sermons were unlike anything they'd heard in Sunday school. He talked of angels with swords, of Babylon rising, of a coming darkness that would sweep through the cities like a virus. He said only those set apart would be spared. To the broken, the paranoid, the disillusioned, he offered something irresistible. Certainty. Purpose. And most intoxicating of all, a role in the final act of history. It didn't take long for word to spread. By spring, more people had arrived. A former schoolteacher from Spokane who'd lost her pension. A man who claimed to be an ex-CIA analyst. Young people in dreadlocks and denim who'd followed hand-drawn maps passed around at gun shows and survivalist forums. They called themselves the Remnant of the Flame. To outsiders, they were just another doomsday cult. But to each other, they were the beginning of a new kingdom. What made the remnant different wasn't just their isolation. It was their doctrine. Elijah, or Father Enoch, had rewritten Revelation in a way that made it immediate. The beast wasn't some future antichrist. It was the modern world itself. The government. The media. The poisoned food. The compromised churches with their soft doctrine and tax exemptions. And the fire wasn't just metaphorical. It was coming. Real, literal, all-consuming fire. He described it in terrifying detail, visions of cities melting, bodies turning to ash, rivers boiling. Only those who had purified themselves in the wilderness would be saved. To purify, they had to abandon all ties. Families. Possessions. Even names. One by one, new members were given names from Scripture: Obadiah, Miriam, Ezekiel, Ruth. They burned their IDs, their credit cards, their photographs. They buried their past. They built a compound, though no one called it that. It was the sanctuary. From the air, it was nearly invisible. Tucked deep in a forested ravine, camouflaged tarps covered cabins and storage sheds. Smoke from fires was carefully filtered through trenches. Patrols were posted at night. Guns were cleaned daily. Locals began to notice strange things. Bonfires flickering through the trees, far past midnight. Chanting, low, guttural, in what one hunter said was some kind of dead language. Occasionally, people would appear in Kalispell or Whitefish to buy bulk rice or ammo, but they rarely spoke. They always paid in cash. Rumors began to swirl. That the cult, because by now, that's what everyone was calling them, had a cryptic initiation. That they practiced self-flagellation. That children weren't allowed to speak. No one had proof. No one had seen the compound up close. And no one, had ever escaped. Until Grace. But it wasn't until a woman named Grace Whitman escaped barefoot from the woods in the dead of winter that the world began to understand what was really happening beyond the tree line. Grace Whitman was 27 when she arrived at the sanctuary. She'd grown up in Southern California. Middle class. Catholic. Her father died when she was 14, and something in her unraveled after that. By college, she dropped out of UCLA, joined a few fringe movements, and was known in certain online spiritual forums for her long rants about the Luciferian Matrix. She'd seen a post about Father Enoch on an old conspiracy board. The phrase, 144,000 chosen, struck something deep in her. She took a bus to Montana and never told her family where she was going. At first, Grace was devout. She embraced the rituals, the fasting, the work. But something shifted. She began to ask questions. Why were certain members given more food than others? Why were women forbidden from reading certain books? Why were they training children to use knives? She was labeled rebellious. And in the sanctuary, that was a dangerous thing to be. According to Grace, they put her in a pit. Literally, a pit dug in the ground, covered by logs and brush, where she was kept for 7 days with nothing but a canteen of water and scraps of jerky. She was told it was for purification. That God was burning the doubt out of her. But Grace did not break. She waited. She listened. And then, one night in January 1994, when a snowstorm masked her escape, she ran. She ran barefoot through the woods for 5 miles. When she was found by a rancher on County Road 83, her feet were frostbitten, her clothes were shredded, and she weighed less than 90 pounds. But what she said, what she told authorities, that changed everything. Grace said the compound was preparing for something called the opening of the 7 seals, a twisted version of Revelation's apocalypse. Each seal, she explained, corresponded to a phase of purification. Seal 1 was severance, cutting ties from the outside world. Seal 2 was submission, blind obedience to Father Enoch. Seal 3 was silence, where speaking was forbidden for weeks. Seal 4 was suffering, fasting, sleep deprivation, isolation. Seal 5 was sacrifice, offering something of great personal value. Seal 6 was sanctification, a final rite involving fire. Seal 7 was never discussed aloud. But Grace said she'd seen things. Children put through physical trials. A man burned with coals for speaking out of turn. And, worst of all, something they called the purge. She didn't know what it was. But people had vanished. Grace's testimony was enough to trigger an investigation. But what authorities would discover over the following months would shake them to their core, and make headlines around the world. The FBI would soon uncover a map. Drawn by hand. Covered in biblical references, stars, and strange symbols. It pointed not just to one compound, but to 5. 5 sites. 5 sanctuaries. 5 factions of the remnant, spread across the American wilderness. And every single one of them was preparing for war. Grace Whitman was 27 when she stumbled out of the woods near Hungry Horse, Montana. She had been missing for over 2 years. Her mother thought she was dead. Her file was marked inactive. A footnote. Another troubled girl who had vanished in the Pacific Northwest. But Grace had not disappeared. She had been taken. When the rancher found her, she was wearing what looked like homespun cloth. Her hands were raw and bleeding, her eyes sunken with fear. Her first words were barely a whisper. "They're not who they say they are. The children are theirs now. You have to stop them before the purge." The purge of light, she called it. And no one knew what that meant. Yet. For the first 72 hours, Grace was kept in a Kalispell hospital under psychological observation. Doctors suspected trauma-induced psychosis. But her story never changed. She spoke of being renamed Sister Galilee. Of having her head shaved under the stars while Father Enoch recited scripture from memory. Of being told she had unclean blood and needed to be emptied. She described how women were considered vessels, containers for divine reincarnation. They were forbidden to speak during certain hours, could only eat food anointed by the fire, and were cleansed weekly through ice baths, fasting, and ritual humiliation. She said she'd once been locked in a cellar for 5 days for crying during a sermon. That she watched a woman give birth on a floor of pine needles, only to have the infant taken by the elders and raised communally. That Father Enoch claimed the child was Saint Stephen reborn. Grace's recollections revealed the cult's terrifying hierarchy. At the top was Father Enoch, the flame-bearer and supposed final prophet before the world's cleansing. Beneath him were the 12 kings, older men, all handpicked. Former pastors, ex-military, survivalists. They acted as governors, disciplinarians, and teachers. Then came the vessels, all women. Ranked not by seniority, but by purity. Below them, the children of the flame, a generation raised entirely inside the sanctuary, most of whom had no memory of the outside world. New recruits were called ashlings. Ashlings were stripped of their identities on arrival. Their names were burned in a communal fire. They were baptized in the icy waters of Flathead Lake, forced to memorize entire chapters of Revelation, and assigned mentors who reported any doubt or hesitation. Rituals were frequent and brutal. One involved being buried alive, briefly, under snow to symbolize death to the flesh. Another involved silence fasting, where recruits could not speak, write, or make eye contact for 21 days. Grace claimed that several recruits never came back from these trials. But the most disturbing part? The children were never taught fear. They were taught obedience. Even when they watched someone scream. As Grace told her story, investigators quietly reopened old files. And what they found painted a grim pattern. Between 1992 and 1994, a total of 16 individuals had gone missing in the surrounding counties. Many had similar profiles: spiritual seekers, survivalists, the mentally unwell, or people with no close family. Most were dismissed as voluntary disappearances. But some weren't. A gas station attendant recalled a man named Victor, a regular customer, who came in one day with a shaved head and glassy eyes. He bought 20 cans of lye and said it was for spiritual purging. The attendant filed a report. Nothing was done. A local librarian remembered a soft-spoken young woman named Clara who checked out the Apocrypha every 2 weeks. One day, she returned all her books, donated her car to a local church, and said she was going to become flame. She was never seen again. People noticed. But fear kept them silent. Locals had begun calling the area near the forest line Dead Hollow. Hunters avoided it. Ranchers refused to ride near it at night. Strange howls. Drums echoing through the trees. And those lights, the fires that burned blue in the distance. By early 1995, Grace's account had sparked concern in Washington. The FBI began a quiet file. Codename, Project Morningstar. At first, they sent in drones. But the sanctuary's canopy was thick, and the drones were grounded more than once by unknown signal interference. So, they went old school. A 38-year-old agent named Daniel Resnick, a specialist in infiltration and former seminarian, volunteered to go undercover. He studied the scriptures obsessively. Memorized sermons. Shaved his head. Adopted the identity of Brother Amos, a former fire lookout turned spiritual wanderer. On February 3, 1995, he was dropped at a trailhead near the forest's edge, carrying nothing but a duffel bag and a story. He was never seen again. Not a single radio signal. No tracker ping. Just gone. 3 months later, the government couldn't keep it quiet any longer. The loss of a federal agent escalated the situation dramatically. A multi-agency task force was assembled, FBI, ATF, and a small group from the Bureau of Indian Affairs familiar with the terrain. Their goal, locate the sanctuary, assess the threat, and extract any hostages, especially children. But there was a problem. No one knew exactly where the compound was. The forest was vast. The terrain was unforgiving. And the cult had taken extreme measures to remain invisible, camouflaging paths, using underground bunkers, and employing scouts at every access point. Locals, even if they had known something, weren't talking. Fear gripped the valley like ice. What they did have was Grace. While recovering in a secure location, Grace began to draw. She sketched a map, not with roads or trails, but with stars. She said the sanctuary's buildings were arranged in the shape of a celestial seal, designed to open the heavens when the time came. She recalled waking at night to chants about alignments and blood moons, and how the compound had a throne room with obsidian floors, where Father Enoch spoke of the purge of light. According to Grace, the purge was the final phase. It would begin with a sacrifice, followed by the mass release of pure children into the world, to carry the fire into Babylon. She said they had been stockpiling weapons. Chemicals. That she had seen diagrams of blueprints for devices she didn't understand. That's when the word domestic terror threat first appeared in the file. But before any raid could be planned, the task force needed eyes inside. This time, they sent two. A wilderness survival expert named Lena Morell, and a National Guard linguist named Jason Petrov, both outfitted with covert tracking tech. Their mission, approach as seekers, gain trust, locate Agent Resnick or any evidence of the purge, and transmit coordinates. They entered in late summer, posing as a brother-sister pair looking for spiritual shelter. For 6 days, no contact. On day 7, a signal pinged briefly, a heartbeat from the GPS beacon. Then silence. A week later, a package arrived at a ranger station near Kalispell. Inside, a burned ID tag. A lock of hair. A page from the Book of Revelation, heavily marked in red ink. And a cassette tape. The tape was grainy. Garbled. But what it contained has never been released in full. Only fragments have been verified. The fire cleanses, not because it destroys, but because it reveals. They were never your children. They were chosen before birth. You only borrowed them. If Babylon strikes us, the trumpets will sound, and we will be taken into the light. The voice was unmistakable. Father Enoch. And he sounded calm. Almost proud. The final line of the tape? To the watchers, we welcome your wrath. It is the final confirmation of our truth. Plans were drawn up for a raid. Chinooks were fueled. Snipers were posted. A perimeter was quietly formed over 14 miles of forest. But the night before the strike, every single scout in the surrounding area reported the same thing. The fires were out. The lights were gone. The compound was empty. When the task force entered at dawn, they found remnants. Burned structures. Empty bunkers. An altar of black stone, still warm to the touch. And in the throne room? A single line carved into the obsidian floor. The fire has moved east. In the weeks that followed, media frenzy exploded. Documentaries aired. Book deals were signed. Grace Whitman disappeared into protective custody. The FBI labeled Father Enoch an at-large domestic extremist. But they never found him. Or the Kings. Or the children. What they did find, scattered across Idaho, Utah, and Colorado, were 5 new compounds. Each aligned to a different star. Each built with the same symbols. Each silent, for now. What happened to the children? Where is Father Enoch now? And what is the Purge of Light really about? Because in the next part of this investigation, we uncover a hidden manifesto, a secret network of underground sanctuaries, and the most disturbing theory of all. That the remnant of the flame never intended to survive. They intended to ignite. March 14, 1999, 9:07 p.m., secure FBI channel. The fire is already lit. Hurry. That was the last message received from Special Agent Daniel Myers before he vanished. He had been undercover for 3 months. Embedded within a splinter sect of the remnant, he tracked their movements, sent coordinates, and described new compounds, deeper, more militarized, and more fanatical than ever before. His final message was only 6 words. But it triggered Operation Edenfall, one of the most covert, classified, and emotionally devastating investigations in U.S. domestic counterterrorism history. This is the story of that operation. And what law enforcement found during the final raid will haunt everyone who was there for the rest of their lives. By 1999, the government had been watching the remnant for nearly 6 years. They knew the cult had fractured into multiple off-grid communities, some in Idaho, others in Colorado, Utah, and even parts of Nevada. They called them the Outer Sanctuaries. But the group still seemed to answer to one man, Father Enoch. His sermons, distributed via cassette, shortwave, and hand-copied zines, were filled with increasingly militant rhetoric. When the 7th seal opens, the sword will fall upon Babylon. We are not waiting for war. We are the war. But without a criminal act, there was nothing law enforcement could do. Preaching hatred isn't illegal. Training in the woods isn't illegal. Not until blood is spilled. That changed in the spring of 1999. April 8, 1999. Glacier National Park. A solo hiker named Mark Teller reported a smell like burned meat coming from a patch of trees. At first, he thought it was a dead elk. But what he found was worse. A makeshift pyre. Charred bones. Something like a ceremonial altar made of stones. At first, the remains couldn't be identified. Too badly burned. But there were signs. Deliberate carvings on the ribs. Teeth missing, removed, not lost. And at the scene, buried beneath moss, they found a small metal pendant, a heart with an opal center. DNA testing confirmed it belonged to a girl named Hannah Pierce, reported missing from Portland, Oregon, 3 years earlier. She had last been seen getting into a van with out-of-state plates after a Christian youth group meeting. The case had gone cold. Now it was open again. And it was worse than anyone feared. The FBI launched a full forensic investigation into the site. What they found suggested not just murder, but ritual sacrifice. This wasn't just ideology anymore. This was action. By this time, the cult had evolved. The remnant of the Flame was no longer just a fringe group. It had become a network, tight-lipped, mobile, using coded language and decentralized cells. Each sanctuary was self-sufficient, loyal, and secretive. Grace Whitman had warned that the children were being prepared. Now it seemed that preparation had begun. Surveillance revealed new bunkers dug deep into the sides of hills. Smoke patterns consistent with underground furnace systems. An increase in young recruits, many under 18, reported missing from California, Washington, and Colorado. All signs pointed to the cult preparing for something big. And then, a ghost signal. Agent Daniel Myers was a seasoned undercover operative. Deep cover in militia circles. Multiple commendations. Level-headed. Patient. He was chosen to infiltrate what intelligence analysts believed was the new Inner Circle, a group calling themselves the Ember Prophets. This cell was believed to be closest to Father Enoch himself. Daniel posed as a disillusioned ex-Marine named Jonas. He showed up near Moab, Utah, where rumors of a hidden sanctuary had emerged. 4 weeks, no contact. Then, 2 messages. First, they speak of the Flame like it's alive. They believe it will choose who burns. The kids are being trained. It's worse than Waco. Second, the fire is already lit. Hurry. That was the last anyone heard from him. The message was enough. With forensic evidence from Hannah Pierce's remains, and confirmation of a potential second victim found near Ely, Nevada, a federal judge approved the use of force. Operation Edenfall was greenlit. Over 80 agents mobilized. Military support was authorized, though kept off-book. Thermal drones confirmed movement in a remote canyon near the Utah-Arizona border. Over a dozen heat signatures. Children included. The raid was set for May 4, 1999. They expected resistance. What they found was worse. At 3:12 a.m., agents moved in. The entrance to the compound was hidden behind a false rock face. Once breached, they descended into a series of hand-dug tunnels, reinforced with timber and plastic sheeting. The smell was immediate: ash, decay, chemical residue. The first chamber was empty: bunk beds, blankets, signs of recent use. The second was a prayer hall. An altar. Charcoal drawings of angels with flaming swords. A fire pit filled with scorched bones. Animal and human. The third chamber, labeled Zion, was sealed with a steel door, welded shut from the inside. They used thermite to cut through. What lay inside left even the most hardened agents reeling. It was a classroom. Of sorts. 15 small beds. Toys. Scriptures written in crayon. But also metal collars. Chains bolted to the walls. A whiteboard listing purification levels next to each child's name. And one word written in blood-red ink across the far wall. Revelation 14 verse 4. These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. The children were gone. But someone had left behind a tape recorder. On it, the voice of a child reciting scripture. Monotone. Mechanical. Then, Father Enoch's voice. They are the Lamb's army. And Babylon will weep when it sees who carries the sword. Then laughter. Then silence. In the deepest part of the compound, they found what came to be known as the Chapel of Flame. It was circular, carved into the rock. At the center, a stone throne, charred black. Behind it, etched into the wall in a crude, seared pattern. The purge of light has begun. There were no bodies. No children. No Father Enoch. Only ashes. DNA analysis later confirmed at least 4 separate individuals had been immolated there. But none matched Daniel Myers. He was never found. Operation Edenfall was declared a success, publicly. Privately, it was a catastrophe. Over a dozen children, confirmed missing, were never recovered. 5 compounds were found emptied, cleared out days or hours before raids took place. Dozens of followers disappeared. Caches of weapons and chemical precursors were discovered. Father Enoch's image was added to the FBI's most wanted list. But no trace of him has been seen since. Grace Whitman, the original whistleblower, was placed into permanent witness protection. She has not spoken publicly since 1996. But in 2012, someone anonymously posted a series of photos on a deep web forum. Among them, a grainy shot of a group of teenagers in robes, holding candles, standing in front of a flaming symbol. The symbol matched the one carved in the Chapel of Flame. The caption: "We were born of fire. And we are many." The remnant of the flame didn't die in Utah. It spread across small towns, online forums, backroad churches. A new generation has taken up the fire. They don't wear robes anymore. They wear hoodies, carry smartphones, and believe they will finish what Father Enoch started. In the next episode, we go inside the new digital sanctuaries. The recruitment. The radicalization. The children raised to burn the world to save it. Because the fire isn't just lit. It's spreading. February 6, 2001, 3:14 a.m. Outside a remote woodland in Idaho's Sawtooth Mountains, federal agents moved through waist-deep snow. The target, a hidden compound known only as Eden. Satellite footage had shown smoke trails. Thermal scans revealed movement. The final remnant, they believed. The last flicker of the fire. They were prepared for resistance. Weapons. Traps. Gunfire. But what they found was something else entirely. The Eden compound was eerily quiet. Over a dozen wooden structures, buried beneath snow, windows broken, doors swinging in the wind. Inside, agents found only 7 people. Emaciated. Chained to walls. Some naked. All malnourished. They didn't speak. They couldn't. One man kept murmuring the same phrase. "We were too slow. We were too slow. The fire left us behind." One woman had carved a burning eye symbol into her own chest. Another had gouged out her tongue. Medical teams rushed them to safety. All were later deemed psychologically unfit for formal interviews. Inside the main lodge, the agents found a journal, bound in leather, scorched at the edges. Its final page was signed by Elijah Bishop himself. "The chosen have ascended. The fire cleanses. The rest are for the worms." But that wasn't all. Beneath the commune, agents discovered a tunnel, narrow, cold, lined with soot and stone. At the end was a crude metal door, sealed with rusted chain. Behind it, a chapel. Built from bones. The walls were lined with femurs, ribs, and spines. The altar, a skull-encrusted pillar, stood beneath a massive sun symbol scorched into the rock. It was silent. Still. And filled with names. Hundreds of them. etched into the walls, burned into beams, scratched into bone. Children. Dozens of them. Some were traced back to known missing persons from across the country. Others were total unknowns. But one thing was clear: this was a ledger, a catalogue, and possibly a memorial. One name, however, stood out. Imre. No last name. No age. Just a single, chilling phrase beside it. The flame that does not die. Following boot tracks leading away from Eden, a recon team discovered a nearby mountain cabin, hidden in the snow-covered pines. It was silent. Windows blackened with soot. Inside, they found the charred remains of over 24 people. They were seated in a circle, holding hands, heads bowed. At the center, a collapsed stone altar and a pile of ash that had once been parchment and photographs. Among the dead, former cult elders, high-ranking followers, and one body positively identified through dental records as Elijah Bishop, aka Father Enoch. His arms were outstretched, as if welcoming the flames. Forensics confirmed it: mass self-immolation. A final act of devotion. The purge of light had come to its terrible crescendo. Case closed. Or so they thought. The FBI closed the Eden file. Declared the cult dismantled. The press moved on. The ashes cooled. But deep inside that chapel of bones, a handful of names remained unmatched. Including Imre. No child by that name had been reported missing. No record of a birth. No leads. Until 14 years later. August 2, 2015, Denver, Colorado. A 19-year-old woman was arrested for shoplifting. No ID. No record in any database. Malnourished. Pale. Covered in faded scars. When questioned, she gave only one name: Imre. At first, authorities thought it was a fake name, until an FBI analyst recognized it from the Eden file. She was taken into custody. Transferred to Quantico. What she told agents unraveled everything they thought they knew about the remnant of the flame. According to her statement, Imre was born in 1996, inside one of the cult's mobile sanctuaries. She never knew her mother. Children were raised communally, taught that Father Enoch was both prophet and parent. She was told she was chosen. Marked from birth. Destined to be a light-bearer. Her memories were fragmented. She described caves, fire rituals, sermons under the stars, sleep deprivation, and injections she couldn't explain. By age 6, she had memorized the entire book of Revelation. By age 8, she was being trained to lead others. She was never taught. When asked how she survived the final immolation at Eden, her answer was chilling. He told me to run. He said I was the last ember. And when the world forgets, I will remember. Because the fire is patient. In the years following Imre's appearance, investigators began to re-examine dormant leads. They found new forums. Darknet chats. Private online groups using familiar language. 144,000 chosen. Sanctuaries of fire. The Lamb will return. These weren't just nostalgic cultists. They were organized. Recruiting. Adapting. The remnant of the flame didn't die at Eden. It metastasized. They traded robes for VPNs, altars for encrypted message boards. And children, like Imre, had become the vessels for something more terrifying. A new doctrine. No longer waiting for the apocalypse. Now, preparing to ignite it themselves. During one interview, Imre handed the agents a cassette tape she said she'd hidden as a child. The audio was faint, but one voice cut through. To the child who hears this, if the world still stands, know this: fire cannot be killed. It sleeps in the bones of the faithful. And when you are ready, daughter of light, take up the flame. It was Elijah Bishop, speaking directly to her. There's still no proof how many children survived Eden. Theories suggest at least 4 slipped away before the immolation. Others believe the purge was not the end, but a reset. That Father Enoch orchestrated his own death to escape attention, leaving the embers behind to grow in the shadows. Imri disappeared shortly after her final interview. Her whereabouts are unknown. But 4 months later, in a remote Arizona church, parishioners found a message carved into the altar wood. The flame remembers. And beneath it, a symbol. The burning eye. She survived the fire. She remembers the doctrine. And now, she's not the only one. In the next chapter, we follow a journalist who tracked the cult's digital rebirth, one breadcrumb at a time, into the heart of an underground movement hiding in plain sight. And what she uncovered could mean, the fire isn't just alive. It's awakening. February 2015, Prince George Regional Hospital, British Columbia. A disoriented woman is wheeled into the ER. Thin. Dirt-caked. Eyes wide with fear, but something else, too. Conviction. She refuses medication. She speaks in low, rhythmic tones. One line stands out. The flame has kept me. I am its bride. I am the last vessel. Doctors assume delusion. Until a nurse runs a routine DNA test. The results send shockwaves through the RCMP. And then, through the FBI. The woman is confirmed to be the daughter of Grace Whitman, the same woman who escaped the Eden compound in the winter of 1997, barefoot, bloodied, and bearing stories no one wanted to believe. The child everyone thought had perished, had been raised in the shadows. And now she had returned, with a warning. She gave no name. She would only repeat her title. The Last Vessel. Bride of the Flame. Her story, over several days of questioning, was fragmented. But some pieces were crystal clear. She was taken from Grace moments after birth. She was raised in complete isolation, no peers, no formal education. Her caretakers were masked. Silent. She called them the Watchers. Every day, she was read scripture, not just the Bible, but Enochian texts, Apocrypha, and writing said to come directly from Elijah himself. She claimed Elijah Bishop never died in the fire. That the body found in the Eden pyre was a stand-in, sacrificed to deceive the eyes of the faithless. And that the real Elijah had moved west. To prepare a second fire. She said. The first fire cleansed the weak. The second fire will crown the pure. Most investigators dismissed her as unstable. But others weren't so sure. Because in her possession were 3 items. A handwritten letter, dated 2001, signed Father Enoch, with handwriting matching verified samples from Elijah Bishop. A small bronze medallion inscribed with the phrase, I am Ra, walk in light, identical to one found in the Eden Chapel of Bones. A map. Crude. Hand-drawn. Showing a string of waypoints stretching from Idaho to Nevada to Arizona, all marked with a burning eye. One spot in particular caught agents' attention, New Harmony, Utah. A town with no more than 250 people. But just weeks prior, a missing persons report had surfaced. 3 teens. Last seen at a gas station outside town. No trace since. At the same time, locals reported strange lights on the mesa. Chants at night. And a man, charismatic, gray-bearded, preaching by firelight. Always moving. Never staying more than a few nights. Some called him a prophet. Others, just another drifter. But every description matched one man. Elijah Bishop. Officially, Elijah Bishop died in 2001. Autopsy records were filed. The body was claimed. But here's the truth. The remains were too badly burned for conclusive identification. DNA was degraded. All the FBI ever had was circumstantial evidence, and a convenient narrative. No photos. No video. Just ashes. And in the years since, the sightings kept coming. 2003, a street preacher in Las Cruces quotes the Book of Flame, a text known only to Eden initiates. 2007, a fire ritual in northern Arizona is broken up by rangers. The man escapes. All that remains is a leather-bound sermon titled, The Path Beyond Purge. 2010, a small cult in California is raided. The leader disappears hours before, leaving behind only a recorded message. Tell them I walk with fire. Tell them I will return with it. Each time, the voice is different. The name is different. But the message? Always the same. The FBI reopens the Eden file in 2016. What they find is worse than expected. The cult didn't die. It fractured. Dozens of former members who disappeared during the original investigation had re-emerged under new names, often embedded in survivalist groups, doomsday preppers, online spiritual forums, alternative medicine retreats. In 2017, a compound in Montana is found stockpiling weapons. The leader claims he follows the second path. In 2019, a fire ritual in the Nevada desert ends with 2 dead, their bodies branded with a flaming eye symbol. And in 2020, a YouTube channel under the name Cleansing Watch posts a cryptic sermon. When the world is ready, the vessel will rise. The chosen will follow. And the fire will finally meet the sky. The video is deleted within 24 hours. But by then, it's already gone viral. Facial recognition software suggests the speaker may be a 72-year-old man last seen in Montana in 1999. Name: Elijah Bishop. Before the woman known as the last vessel disappears from the hospital, yes, disappears, she leaves behind a final note, written in black marker across the hospital wall. He is not finished. He walks the dust roads. His fire is patient. His bride waits beneath the mountain. Authorities launched a full-scale manhunt. No luck. She was gone. Vanished, just like her mother once had. But her prophecy stayed. Seared into the minds of those who heard it. Especially one line. His fire is patient. Today, the official story remains unchanged. Elijah Bishop died in 2001. The remnant of the flame is defunct. No known active cells remain. But behind the scenes, agencies know better. Because every year, more sightings emerge. A prayer group in southern Utah, all wearing flame pendants. A child found in New Mexico, drawing the burning eye. A cult-themed podcast that ends with a coded message, he still walks. And perhaps most chilling of all? In 2023, a wildfire swept through parts of northern Arizona. At the edge of the burn zone, firefighters found a stone altar. On it, a charred leather-bound book. Inside, a single line. Imri, your fire awaits. What began in Flathead County, Montana, with a drifting ex-seminarian and a few bonfires in the woods, became something no one saw coming. A doctrine. A movement. A virus of belief. Not just about the end of the world, but about who deserves to survive it. Elijah Bishop may be dead. Or he may be preaching on a roadside right now. But one thing is certain. The ashes of Eden have never stopped smoldering. If you're ever driving through the desert, and you see smoke on the horizon, a fire that shouldn't be there, someone preaching by torchlight, you didn't see anything. You didn't hear anything. And whatever you do, don't speak the name. The fire listens. Autumn in the town of Red Pines, Oregon, is postcard perfect. The kind of place where leaves fall like confetti and people still forget to lock their doors. That's not a metaphor. People really don't lock their doors. There's an almost romantic small-town innocence here, the kind that makes you think that nothing truly bad can happen. A kind of protective bubble where bad news is limited to high school breakups or the occasional moose that strays into traffic. But in the fall of 2007, Red Pines lost that innocence. And once it was gone, it never came back. That year, the leaves fell like usual, tourists still showed up for cider tastings and scenic hayrides, but underneath the surface, something else was falling apart. It began, like so many stories do, with a single name on a bulletin board. Emma Grady. Local librarian. 26 years old. Auburn hair, glasses, and a way of talking that made you feel like she knew something you didn't, and maybe she did. Emma wasn't the kind of person to just disappear. She was reliable, almost painfully so. The kind of person who alphabetized her spice rack and rotated her bookmarks by season. People say she'd walk to the library in the rain just to keep the building open, even if no one else showed up. She lived alone in a small two-bedroom bungalow just off Maple Street. Her cat, Miss Buttons, was found meowing on the windowsill 2 days after Emma missed work. That's when people started to worry. Her car was still in the driveway. Lights off. Mail piling up. Police found no signs of forced entry, no struggle, nothing disturbed. Just Emma's reading glasses, folded neatly on the kitchen table. And that was it. The town murmured, but the panic hadn't set in yet. Red Pines is the kind of town where people vanish occasionally. Not mysteriously, but people leave. They move to Portland. They backpack across Europe. They run from bad relationships or worse credit scores. So, Emma's absence was sad, but not unheard of. Not alarming. Until October. Justine Mercado vanished next. 23. Nursing student. She worked part-time at the hospital and tutored biology students on weekends. The kind of girl who made homemade granola bars and brought extra to share. Her last known location? A parking lot outside the Red Pines Community College. Her car door was open, keys still in the ignition. Her purse sat on the passenger seat. Her textbook, a dog-eared copy of Human Anatomy, 9th edition, was open on the dashboard, a highlighted paragraph about the circulatory system glowing in the fading light. And this time, people noticed. Because Red Pines might be innocent, but it's not stupid. 2 young women missing in a month. That's not bad luck. That's a pattern. Then came Claire Doyle. Claire was 29. A bartender at the Hollow Tree, a local bar with exactly 2 pool tables, 1 jukebox, and a framed photo of Elvis that keeps falling off the wall. Claire was tough. Sharp-tongued. The kind of woman who knew how to deal with drunk guys, broken hearts, and every type of rain the Pacific Northwest could throw at her. She didn't take days off. Ever. So, when she missed her shift on November 12th, people started asking questions. By November 13th, they were screaming them. Police conducted searches. Volunteers combed the woods. Drones were flown. Bloodhounds sniffed out false leads that ended in dead ends, quite literally. No traces. No bodies. No calls. No ransom notes. And no suspects. What they did find, though, buried in the woods behind Claire's apartment building, was something else. A shoe. A single red heel. Not Claire's style. Not Emma's size. And Justine didn't even own heels. So whose was it? It didn't match any of the missing girls. It was extra. That's when the whispers began. Maybe it's a cult. Red Pines sits in that eerie sweet spot where small-town charm intersects with Pacific Northwest weirdness. A stone's throw from shadow-drenched forests, moss-covered cabins, and more conspiracy theories than a Reddit thread on crop circles. So, the idea of a cult didn't seem too far-fetched to some. Especially when people started reporting strange lights in the woods. People said they saw bonfires late at night, deep red flames flickering through the pines. Chanting. Always just out of earshot. The kind of stuff you want to write off as teenagers, but can't. One man, an ex-park ranger named Dennis Whalen, claimed he saw figures in robes, circling something, like they were protecting it, or worshipping it. Of course, he also claimed Bigfoot lives near Rainier, so take that as you will. Others had different theories. Human trafficking. Serial killer. Drug cartel. An organ harvesting ring operating out of the abandoned sawmill. Police? They had their own word, coincidence. They told the public there was no sign of a connection. That each disappearance was being treated as an individual case. The town wasn't buying it. Coincidence? Really? 3 women vanish in under 3 months? In a town of just over 6,000 people? That's not coincidence. That's calculated. Then came December. And with it, Danielle Park. 25. Graphic designer. Lived with her sister, Elise, in a rental house off Pine Hollow Road. Danielle was different from the others, quieter, more introverted. She worked remotely, freelancing for clients out of San Francisco and Seattle. She had no ties to the other missing girls. Didn't hang out at the Hollow Tree. Didn't study at Red Pines Community College. Wasn't on any dating apps. Had no record of attending local events. In short, she was invisible. Which is probably why it took so long to realize she was gone. Elise returned home from visiting friends out of town the week before Christmas. She expected to see Danielle working on the couch, laptop open, Spotify playing some sad indie girl music. But the house was quiet. Too quiet. Danielle's phone was missing. So was her laptop. Her bedroom looked untouched. But her keys were still in the bowl by the door. That night, Elise called Danielle's phone. It rang. And then it didn't. 2 days later, hikers found something half buried in the frozen mud near the trailhead by Mirror Lake, a cracked iPhone with the screen spiderwebbed, dirty, cold. Still barely holding a charge. And on it? A video. Grainy. Dark. Unstable. Danielle's face appeared, lit only by a flickering flashlight. She was crying, whispering, breath short. The image shook as she turned the camera toward something we never quite see, just the faintest silhouette in the distance, unmoving, watching. Her last words, in a whisper that still haunts Red Pines to this day. He collects us. Then, static. The screen goes black. That's when Red Pines changed. The town that didn't lock its doors bought deadbolts in bulk. Parents stopped letting kids walk home from school. Porch lights never turned off. And the air carried something heavier than winter. Paranoia. Fear. And beneath it all, an unshakable question. Who was he? The aftermath. By January, the FBI was involved. Press conferences were held. Flyers covered telephone poles and diner windows. National media descended on Red Pines like vultures with microphones, asking the same questions the locals couldn't answer. All 5 women, gone. Still no suspects. Still no bodies. Still no pattern, at least not one anyone could make sense of. But people started noticing smaller things. Off things. Things that, at first, didn't seem connected. A second-grade teacher found pages torn from her classroom's yearbooks, all the girls' photos scratched out. A hiker reported seeing a figure standing at the edge of a cliff for hours, unmoving. When he returned later with a park ranger, the figure was gone, but a circle of pine cones had been arranged in the spot where it stood. A 911 call came in from a sobbing man claiming his wife was missing but still in the house. When officers arrived, the home was empty, and the caller was never identified. Coincidence? Or something else? Theories multiplied like wildfire. Some said it was a disgruntled ex. Others believed it was someone in law enforcement. A rogue local, someone trusted. Someone invisible. The most chilling theory? That whoever was taking these women wasn't doing it for ransom, or revenge. But for collection. That these women weren't chosen at random, but selected, curated. Like someone was building a display. And Danielle's final words? He collects us. They echoed through the town like a warning. A riddle. A prophecy. So, who was he? And what happened to the 5 women who vanished from Red Pines? Were they still alive? Were they underground somewhere, trapped, waiting? Or were they already part of something far more sinister, something that couldn't be undone? The truth is, no one knew. But in early January, that changed. Because someone left a package on the steps of the Red Pines Police Department. No return address. No note. Just a shoebox. Inside? 5 Polaroids. And in each one, a single chair. Wooden. Worn. Placed in the center of an empty room. And in the background of each photo? A different personal item. A cat collar. A college ID. A red heel. And in the final photo, at the bottom right corner, someone's finger. Long pale. Crooked. Pointing. The FBI was finally called in. Not because the local police asked for help, but because they were being drowned in a tidal wave of questions they couldn't answer. 5 women. 0 leads. One town that had stopped sleeping. Enter, but make no mistake, Reed was the best in his field. A man who could read crime scenes like novels and murderers like poems. And after one look at the Red Pines files, he said just 5 words. This man is a curator. Curator. Not killer. Not kidnapper. Not even collector. Curator. The word made people uncomfortable. It wasn't just creepy, it was clinical. Like the women weren't victims, but pieces, deliberately chosen. Framed. Arranged. Reed elaborated. This individual isn't impulsive. He's precise. Strategic. He doesn't just abduct women, he studies them. Watches them. Understands their emotional fractures. And then, he selects. The media jumped on that soundbite faster than a squirrel on espresso. Talk shows ran with it. The curator of Red Pines trended on Twitter. Podcasts launched overnight with titles like He Collects Us and The Fifth Polaroid. But behind all the viral hysteria, a darker realization began to sink in. If the curator was building a collection, what happened when it was complete? That's when a pattern finally emerged. Not from fingerprints. Not from DNA. But from something much subtler. Shared trauma. Investigators dug deeper into the lives of the missing women. And there, buried under surface-level details and social media photos, was the thread they'd been missing. Each woman, Emma, Justine, Claire, Danielle, and the unnamed 5th from the extra shoe, had attended the same obscure therapy seminar at some point in the last 2 years. The Renewal Sessions. An exclusive psychological retreat advertised through word of mouth and fringe wellness blogs. No physical office. No Yelp page. Just a minimalist website with pastel colors, inspirational quotes, and a single line at the bottom. Healing begins with the wound. Sounded poetic. until it started sounding like a warning. The renewal sessions were run by a man named Dr. Gavin Morrow. Former grief counselor. PhD from a university in Vermont that no longer exists. Stylish. Charismatic. The kind of man who could make trauma sound like a spa day. He preached something he called radical isolation therapy. The idea? Strip a person down to their emotional skeleton, confront their deepest fear, then rebuild them from the inside out. Clients were encouraged to sever ties to the outside world. No phones. No clocks. No outside communication. Time is the illusion trauma lives in, Morrow once said. Red flag, much? But people bought in. Desperate people. People who were grieving. People who needed something to work now because traditional therapy had failed them. People like Emma. People like Claire. Dr. Morrow hosted these retreats across the Pacific Northwest. Private cabins. Secluded forests. Always somewhere just out of reach of cell signal and GPS. The perfect setting for healing. Or vanishing. When confronted, Morrow didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. He met the media at the gates of his Bainbridge Island estate like a cult leader giving a TED Talk. Yes, they attended my sessions, he said with that smile, the kind of smile that makes your skin feel tight. But people in pain tend to disappear. Sometimes literally. He chuckled. The press laughed nervously. The FBI did not. But without physical evidence or direct witness testimony, there was nothing to hold him on. No warrant. No bodies. No proof. Just a trail of grief, echoes in the trees, and a man with the calmness of someone who knows he won't be caught. And that's when the phone rang. December 28, 2007. 2:17 a.m. The call came into the Red Pines Emergency Dispatch. Not 911. Not the public line. It came to the private line of Detective Elise Monroe. She was asleep at the time. Hadn't taken her phone off silent since the press started leaking her number. But that night, something woke her. Some instinct. Some shiver. She checked her phone. Voicemail. One new message. No caller ID. No metadata. The number was listed as unknown origin. The message began with static. Sharp, crackling static, like someone rubbing a mic against concrete. And then, a voice. Female. Soft. Distant. Like she was in a tunnel, or a basement. She said, "I'm still here. I don't know where. But I think he's getting ready." Pause. He talks to us like we're not real. Like we're pieces of something bigger. Like we're not people. More static. Please. Please tell my sister I didn't leave her. I didn't run. He chose me. There was a click. Then silence. And then, just before the voicemail cut off, one more sound. FBI forensics tried to trace the call. Nothing. The number was a ghost. A one-way line through what might as well have been another dimension. The voicemail was clean of background noise, no wind, no animals, not even electrical hum. Whoever sent it had gone to great lengths to strip the audio. But not perfect lengths. Because Reed caught something. On the third playback, just after Danielle says, "He talks to us," there's a faint flutter of feedback. It wasn't random static. It was music. Barely audible. But once isolated and enhanced, it revealed a song. Claire de Lune. Debussy. Played slow. Slower than normal. Like it was coming from an old cassette or a warped record player. Why is that important? Because according to Reed, that song has one very specific use. It's a memory trigger. used in some forms of trauma therapy to relax the mind just before confronting repressed memories. The kind of therapy Gavin Morrow was famous for. Which meant one thing. Danielle's message wasn't just a cry for help. It was a breadcrumb. A clue. A way to say, I'm still out here. And he's getting ready. But ready for what? That's what the FBI, and the town of Red Pines, still didn't know. What was the endgame? Was the curator preparing for another abduction? A mass display? A message? And if his collection was almost complete? What happened when it was? They would get an answer sooner than anyone expected. Because 2 weeks after Danielle's voicemail surfaced, another item appeared. Not a body. Not a phone. But a package. Left on Dr. Morrow's front porch. Wrapped in brown paper. No return address. Inside? A single item. A music box. Cracked. Wooden. Painted with faded white roses. When opened, it played Claire de Lune, slowed to the exact speed of the voicemail recording. And inside the lid, scrawled in ink. You forgot one. The call came in just after midnight. A woman. Shaking. Untraceable number. She didn't give her name. Didn't have to. Her voice said enough. I was in his house, she whispered, barely audible over the line. I saw the room. The room. 2 words. 6 letters. Enough to get a warrant. January 12, 2008. The FBI and Red Pines PD descended on Gavin Morrow's estate like a winter storm. A secluded, woodsy cabin near the Puget Sound. Picturesque. Tastefully modern. Painted a cheerful robin's egg blue, like the set of a holiday commercial. It was almost offensive how normal it looked. Morrow wasn't home. Or at least, no one answered the door. But the officers weren't waiting this time. With warrant in hand, they moved through the house like shadows. Room by room. Methodical. Focused. Living room. Immaculate. Kitchen. Spotless. Bedroom. Too neat. A journal sat open beside the bed, dated 3 weeks prior. Morrow's own handwriting. Philosophical ramblings about memory and identity. Nothing incriminating, just unsettling. It wasn't until they reached the back hallway, behind a bookshelf bolted to the wall, that they found it. The hidden door. False panel. New hinges. And behind it? Stairs. The team descended into a world no one was prepared for. What they found beneath that house, beneath that smiley, pastel exterior, was a place no one could explain away. The room. Soundproofed. Sterile. Terrifying. The walls were white, too white. Like a hospital operating room. No windows. Just a faint hum from recessed lighting. Along one wall, 5 wooden chairs. Each one identical. Each one occupied. Not by bodies. But mannequins. And not just mannequins, but mannequins dressed in the clothing of the missing women. Emma's maroon cardigan. Justine's nursing scrubs. Claire's hollow tree apron. Danielle's yellow windbreaker. And the 5th, a pale blue dress with no match on record. Likely belonging to the unidentified victim linked only by a red heel. Each mannequin had been carefully positioned. Legs crossed. Hands on laps. Heads tilted, posed. Like they were having a quiet conversation. Or waiting for one to begin. But the horror didn't stop there. On the shelves surrounding the room were journals. Dozens. Stacked neatly. Color-coded. Labeled by name. Emma. Justine. Claire. Danielle. The 5th. And they weren't written by Morrow. They were written by the women themselves. Handwriting confirmed. Page after page of entries. Some dated weeks after the women had vanished. Others appeared fresh, ink still unfaded, as if written only days before. The contents were chilling. Not because they were violent, but because they were therapeutic. Structured like assignments. As if someone, Morrow, had continued their therapy in secret. Off the grid. Off the record. But there was more. Taped inside the covers were photos. Candids of the women before they disappeared. Walking. Driving. Smiling. Being watched. Every one of them unaware. The final page of each journal bore the same word. Written in large, capital letters. Scrawled hastily. Desperate. Final. Collected. Let that sink in. Not completed. Not cured. Collected. The implication? This wasn't about healing. It wasn't about therapy. It was about ownership. Control. Curation. Like Morrow wasn't just stealing lives, he was cataloging them. Displaying them. Making his own private museum of pain. And still, no bodies. No blood. No DNA. No fingerprints. Everything was clean. Sterile. As if the room had never been used. Or had been used, and then reset. The FBI called it the most psychologically disturbing crime scene they'd encountered in a decade. And still, no sign of Morrow. It was like he'd vanished. Gone underground. Or worse. Watching. Because that same night, as investigators were cataloging evidence, the security system at the Red Pines PD was triggered. At exactly 2:44 a.m., a figure was seen on the surveillance camera outside the evidence locker. The image was grainy. Blurred by fog. But the silhouette was unmistakable. A man. Tall. Lean. Wearing a coat with robin's egg blue lining. He stood at the door for exactly 17 seconds. Then turned and walked away. No forced entry. No message. Just presence. The media had a field day. The curator returns. He watches his collection. Talk shows spun wild theories, that Morrow had help. That he was part of a larger network. That the mannequins were symbolic placeholders, meant to hold space until the women were returned. Some said the women were still alive, somewhere underground. Others whispered they had become something else. But one thing was undeniable. This wasn't over. Then, on January 18th, a woman named Alina Westbrook came forward. A writer. 32. Lived in Portland. She had attended one of Morrow's renewal retreats. And she had a story. Alina described the therapy as cult-adjacent. Upon arrival, participants were stripped of all belongings. Phones locked away. They were assigned numbers, not names. And then led through a sequence of exercises meant to dismantle identity. No clocks. No windows. Just routines. Sessions included things like mirror shaming, regression rehearsals, and the cryptic identification of fracture points. But the moment that broke her, the moment she left, was on the third night. A private meeting. With Morrow. She was taken into a separate room. Sat down across from him. And told, "You're not ready to be collected yet. But I see potential." She said she laughed. Thought it was a joke. But he didn't laugh back. And he didn't blink. The next morning, she left. No goodbye. No refund. Just the overwhelming instinct to get out. She had nightmares for weeks. Didn't talk about it, until she saw Claire Doyle's face on the news. And recognized her. They'd both been in the same session. 2 chairs apart. Claire had stayed. Alina hadn't. That testimony finally gave the FBI enough to issue a federal warrant. A full manhunt began. Roadblocks. Posters. Interrogations. But Morrow remained a ghost. And just when investigators thought the trail had gone cold, it got colder. Because the mannequins disappeared. 3 days after being taken into evidence, the mannequins, now stored in a secure facility in Salem, were gone. No signs of entry. No security breach. Just an empty storage unit and a single item left behind. A Polaroid. Grainy. Faded. 5 chairs. Empty. No mannequins. No women. Just a line of text scrawled on the bottom. They are no longer on display. By February of 2008, Red Pines wasn't just a haunted town. It was a headline. The case had gone national. Broadcasts, podcasts, documentaries, Reddit threads 200 comments deep. A generation of true crime junkies clutched their coffees tighter every time someone whispered, "He collects us." The FBI was drowning in tips, most of them useless. Sightings of Gavin Morrow in gas stations, ski resorts, vegan cafes. One woman claimed she saw him in a hot yoga class in Albuquerque. But eventually, finally, pressure worked. The walls closed in. And the man now known to the world as the Collector was arrested. March 6, 2008. Morrow was found not hiding in a bunker, or wearing someone else's face, or murmuring cryptic poems in a padded cell. Nope. He was at a vineyard. In Sonoma. Sampling Syrah. His arrest was quiet. No dramatic chase. No last words monologue. He even thanked the officers. Ah. So it's time. That's what the press called it, one of the most bizarre criminal profiles of the decade. Fans called it misunderstood genius. Morrow called it therapy. In the interrogation room, he was a performance piece. He wept when they showed him photos of the mannequins. He laughed when asked about the journals. He quoted Carl Jung so many times the agent started a tally. "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely," he said. "Do you not see? I was giving them peace. Rehearsal is the only form of true healing." He never confessed. Not once. But he never denied anything, either. Instead, he twisted words like wire, offering just enough rope to hang himself, then folding it into origami. When asked why he staged mannequins in a soundproof room, he smiled. "Therapeutic reenactments," he said. "Symbolic closure." When asked about the journals, fictional exercises. Explorations of trauma narratives. All voluntary. When asked what collected meant, "It's an allegory. You people really need to read more poetry." And then came the trial. It was a circus. People camped outside the courthouse. He signed autographs. Smiled for selfies. Wore a tailored black suit with a crimson tie, matching the word "collected" tattooed across someone's forearm in the front row of spectators. Yes, people got tattoos. That's where we were now. On the stand, Morrow spoke with eloquence. Clarity. Charisma. His lawyers painted him as a misunderstood innovator. A therapeutic radical ahead of his time. A victim of media hysteria and misinterpreted art installations. And, tragically, they won. Morrow walked. June 2, 2008. Not guilty. Lack of evidence. No DNA. No bodies. No direct proof that the women had ever even been in the room beneath his house. The journals were deemed inadmissible, obtained through questionable chain of custody. The mannequins? Therapeutic tools. The photos? Not time-stamped. Could be anything. The tapes? Still missing. And so, with a gentle nod to the judge and a Cheshire Cat grin to the cameras, Gavin Morrow left the courthouse. But something had changed. Behind the smiles, the wine glasses, the fans, there was something off. In interviews, he became evasive, irritated, paranoid. He moved twice in 6 months, cancelled public appearances, and then, he vanished. Just, gone. Left everything behind. House sold. Bank account emptied. No notes. No sightings. No whispers. The collector had vanished. Just like his victims. The years crawled by. Leads dried up. Red pines grew quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence now, less like peace, more like trauma with a fresh coat of paint. The families? Most stopped asking questions. You can only scream into a void for so long before the echo stops answering. Podcasts moved on. The true crime world found new monsters. And Red Pines was left with cold cases. So cold, they began to frost over. Until July 14, 2022. Montana. The Beartooth Mountains. 2 hikers were scouting off-trail near a ridge known as Dead Elk Pass when they stumbled on something unusual. A patch of ground that echoed when stepped on. They dug, curious. What they uncovered was a sealed storm shelter buried beneath a ring of dead trees, half swallowed by the earth. Rusty. Chained. Bolted. They called it in. And when officials opened it, they found something that would turn a decade-old mystery into something darker. Much darker. Inside were 3 things. 7 skeletons. 3 reels of 16mm film. And a handwritten letter, addressed not to the police, but to the curious. The skeletons were arranged in a circle. Seated. Facing inward. Each one positioned in a chair. Each chair labeled with a brass plate. Emma. Justine. Claire. Danielle. The 5th read, Cass. The name never previously released to the public. The 6th, Alina. The 7th? Blank. Just a number. 7. Forensics confirmed it. The DNA matched. All 6 women who vanished between 2007 and 2008 were there. Including Alina Westbrook, the woman who once testified against Morrow. Which meant she had returned to him. Willingly. Or not. But it was the 7th skeleton that raised the most questions. A woman. Mid-30s. Still unidentified. No reported missing persons matching her DNA on file. Which begged a terrifying question. Was she the last? Or the first? The reels of film were even worse. They were recovered, restored, and reviewed by federal analysts. The contents remain classified. But according to one leaked report, each reel showed sessions. Not therapy. Not torture. But something in between. The final reel cuts off mid-sentence. A light flickers. Then goes black. And a voice whispers. Someone will find this. They always do. The handwritten letter? We'll read it in full in part 5. But here's how it ends. They were never prisoners. They were portraits. And art does not beg to be understood. Only seen. Signed. The curator. The reels were silent. Grainy. Shaky. Fragile things, 16mm film stock long since considered obsolete. But the FBI's technicians handled them like sacred relics. They loaded the first reel. The projector clicked. And then they watched. Each film was labeled with a name. Emma, Justine, Claire, Danielle, Cass, Alina. 1 reel for each. 6 women. 6 sessions. 6 portraits of control. There were no screams. No blood. No chains. Just a chair. A woman. And Gavin Morrow's voice, calm, deliberate, like a bedtime story wrapped in razor wire. "Tell me what hurt you the most," he said in the first reel. Emma sat stiffly. Silent. Her eyes flickered toward the camera. "I said," Morrow continued, "tell me the moment you fractured. That's where we begin. Not with facts. With pain." She spoke. Slowly. Quietly. And he listened. Not like a therapist. Like a conductor, guiding a symphony of suffering. Reel after reel. The same rhythm. Each woman seated alone. Each session a descent into something colder than cruelty, coercive empathy. Morrow would validate. Then invalidate. Praise. Then disorient. One moment, he called them brilliant, brave, transcendent. The next, he questioned their memories. Implanted new ones. Rewrote old traumas with surgical calm. "They never loved you, you know. That's why I do. I see the wound, and I don't look away. Your pain has value. Let me preserve it. You're not a victim. You're a canvas." There was no yelling. No visible force. Just hours of psychological erosion. Gaslighting. Rehearsed affection. Weaponized trust. FBI profilers coined a term for it, emotional harvesting. Because that's what it was. He didn't want their bodies. He wanted what hurt inside them. He harvested their grief, fear, confusion, pressed it like flowers between the pages of their journals. Preserved it in the grain of old film. Like pain was an art form. Like these women were masterpieces in progress. And then came the final reel. Unlabeled. Damaged. But playable. No woman in this one. Just Morrow. Alone. Seated in the same chair. Facing the camera. Staring. Smiling. And speaking softly. As if to us. "You think this was about death? You still don't understand. They weren't victims. They were volunteers. Broken things that asked to be restored. You see monsters. I see curations." He leaned closer. The image flickered. "I never killed them. I transformed them. They were messy. Unfinished. Abandoned. I gave them purpose." He stood. Walked toward the camera. The footage blurred. Then steadied. His face now inches from the lens. Whispering. "That's what you never understood. I didn't take their lives. I collected their pain." A pause. Then. "That's what makes them beautiful." End of reel. His final letter echoed that same delusion. Written in Morrow's careful script, the letter addressed not the police, not the victims' families, but the curious. It read like a manifesto. Equal parts apology and love letter to his own madness. He referred to himself not as a killer, but a memory archivist. Claimed he created emotional museums no one else had the courage to enter. And at the end, just before the signature. "You will never find me. Not because I hide, but because you still expect monsters to look like monsters. They don't. They look like help. They sound like healing. They wear pastel sweaters and say things like, 'You're safe now.'" Morrow's body was never found. No trace of him in the shelter. No blood. No sign of finality. Just a coat left on the back of a chair, and one final Polaroid. An empty chair. Facing the camera. Brass plate on the front. 8. The theories exploded. Some say he died in that bunker, alone, consumed by the same psychological prison he created for others. Others claim he escaped, fled to South America. Or Eastern Europe. Or Alaska. One viral photo claimed he was living under a new identity in Iceland, teaching meditation on YouTube. Unconfirmed. The fact that Gavin Morrow's legacy lives on, not just in crime files or cold cases, but in the way we talk about trauma. In the way we commodify suffering. In the way brokenness becomes performance. Because he didn't just take lives. He told a story so convincingly, some people believed him. Some still do. Some serial killers chase chaos. Others crave control. Gavin Morrow was different. He didn't kill for pleasure, or power, but for permanence. He didn't want victims. He wanted artifacts. A living museum of human suffering. And the scariest part? He almost got away with it. On a cold February evening in 2004, a 21-year-old nursing student crashed her car on a remote New Hampshire road, and vanished. No footprints. No trail. No clear motive. And no body. But here's what makes this different: she emailed her professors. Lied to her boss. Emptied her bank account. And then disappeared. For 20 years, the internet has obsessed over the mystery of Maura Murray, America's first digital age missing person case. But was this a premeditated escape? A tragic accident? Or something far more sinister? Stay with me. Because the deeper we go, the more tangled and disturbing this story becomes. Let's rewind. February 9, 2004. It's a Monday. The kind of cold that slices through gloves and leaves frost on your eyelashes. New Hampshire roads are slick with ice and crusted snowbanks tower on either side. In the distance, the mountains loom silent, patient, ancient. And somewhere in this wintry expanse, a life quietly unravels. Maura Murray was 21. A bright, athletic, intelligent young woman. She was studying nursing at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. On the surface, she was the kind of student parents brag about at dinner parties: dean's list, disciplined, focused. But scratch that surface just a little, and things start to fray. The crash that night wasn't her first. And it wasn't the only mystery she left behind. The story doesn't begin with the crash. It begins in fragments. Odd, unsettling fragments. The kind that don't make sense until it's too late. On February 5th, just 4 days before she disappeared, Maura had a breakdown at her campus job. She worked security for one of the dorms. Routine stuff. Scanning IDs. Watching for partygoers with fake licenses and contraband booze. But that night, something went wrong. Around 1 a.m., her supervisor found her in a catatonic state. Not tired. Not upset. Gone. Staring blankly at a piece of paper on her desk. When asked what was wrong, Maura could only muster a whisper: "My sister." Now here's the twist. Later, we find out that her sister, Kathleen, had indeed had a difficult phone call with Maura that night. Kathleen had just gotten out of rehab and relapsed. She called Maura, drunk and upset. The details are sketchy, but whatever was said clearly shattered Maura's focus. She was escorted back to her dorm. But she never told anyone else, no friends, no professors, not even her boyfriend, that anything was wrong. That's the first crack. But there's more. The next few days are a kaleidoscope of strange decisions. Saturday, February 7th, Maura's father, Fred Murray, visits her at UMass. They go car shopping, Maura had recently wrecked her Toyota, and Fred wanted to help her find a replacement. That night, she borrows his brand new Toyota Corolla to run errands. But on the way back, she crashes it. No alcohol in her system. No injuries. But the damage? Over $10,000. Fred doesn't seem angry. In fact, he rents her a hotel room and tells her they'll deal with it in the morning. He drives back to Connecticut. Maura spends that night in her dorm. On Sunday, she talks to her boyfriend, Bill Roche. He's in Oklahoma, stationed at Fort Sill with the Army. According to him, everything seems normal. No panic. No sign she's planning to disappear. They say, "I love you." They talk about Valentine's Day. And then Monday comes. On February 9th, Maura sends emails to her professors, telling them there's been a death in the family, and that she'll be gone for a week. Spoiler, there was no death. She also calls her nursing school to let them know she'll be away. Then she empties her bank account, $280. Not exactly a start a new life fund. She goes to the DMV and picks up accident forms. Then, curiously, she buys alcohol, vodka, Kahlua, Baileys, and some boxed wine. She packs up her dorm room, neatly placing belongings into boxes and stacking them in the corner. She removes all pictures from the wall. Her bedding is stripped. On top of a box sits a printed email from her boyfriend. Some see this as the beginning of a permanent goodbye. Others? Just a college student trying to tidy up before a short trip. Around 3:30 p.m., she gets in her Saturn sedan and drives north. No one knows why. Her destination? Unknown. At 7:27 p.m., Maura crashes her car into a snowbank on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, a desolate stretch of highway surrounded by trees and silence. A local resident, Butch Atwood, hears the crash and comes outside. He sees a young woman, Maura, standing beside the car. He offers help. She refuses. She says she's called AAA. She hadn't, there was no cell service in that area. Butch drives back home and calls 911 anyway. When police arrive 7 to 10 minutes later, Maura is gone. Now, you might be thinking, missing person cases happen every day. But this one was different. Because this was 2004. The dawn of the internet sleuth. Online forums. Message boards. Blogs. Podcasts. Reddit threads. Everyone had an opinion. And everyone wanted answers. Was it a planned disappearance? A panic-induced flight? Did she meet someone there? Or worse, did someone find her? For the first time in history, an entire case was dissected not just by professionals, but by thousands of armchair detectives around the globe. And they noticed things. Lots of things. Here's what the internet found, and trust me, you'll want to buckle in for this part. Theory 1, she ran away to start over. Some believe Maura was overwhelmed. School. Relationships. The crash. Her sister's relapse. Her father's pressure. Maybe she just snapped. Planned a quiet escape. Chose the White Mountains as her reset button. Evidence? The packed room. The goodbye emails. The map to Vermont found in her car. But here's the catch, she didn't take anything that would help her survive. No hiking gear. No extra clothing. No substantial money. No digital trail. And it was freezing. Who starts a new life with $280 and vodka? Theory 2, she died in the woods. Some say she panicked after the crash, fled into the forest to avoid getting in trouble, and succumbed to the elements. It was below freezing that night. Visibility? Low. Hypothermia can kick in quickly. But, no footprints? No scent trail for dogs to follow. No body ever found. Not even a shoe. Theory 3, she was picked up, and something went wrong. Maybe she hitched a ride. Someone came along before police arrived. And they weren't who they seemed. This theory has haunted true crime fans for decades. And it comes with chilling questions. Who got to her before the police? Was this someone she knew? Or was it someone who'd been watching? The more you dig, the weirder it gets. Phone records. Maura made a call to a number linked to a condo rental agency in Vermont the day she disappeared. Was she booking a getaway? The rag in the tailpipe. When police arrived at her abandoned car, they found a rag stuffed inside the tailpipe. Her father insists he told her to do that to prevent smoke from blowing out when the car was in bad shape. But others suspect it could point to suicide. Her boyfriend's role, Bill Roche, flew out to join the search. He seemed desperate to find her. But later reports claim he had been controlling. There were rumors, unverified, of emotional manipulation. Some online sleuths suspect he may know more than he said. But there's no concrete evidence to accuse anyone. Just a lot of what-ifs. For days, weeks, months, search teams combed the area. Dogs. Helicopters. Ground teams. Divers. Nothing. Not a single shred of physical evidence beyond the car. Her family plastered flyers everywhere. Fred Murray walked miles of wooded trails. Day after day. Year after year. Looking for a shoe. A scrap of clothing. Anything. But Maura had disappeared as if the forest itself swallowed her. And time, well, time has a way of eroding memory. But this case? It's still raw. Still alive. Still without closure. Every so often, something new bubbles up. A house near the crash site allegedly gave off cadaver dog alerts in its basement. But police never dug. Years later, Fred Murray begged for that area to be searched. Still, nothing confirmed. Tips roll in constantly. A woman on the side of the road who looked like Maura. A photo from Canada. A rumor from New York. Each one builds hope. And each one ends in heartbreak. This was the first real internet missing person case. It came just as blogs were rising. Before Facebook, before Twitter, before TikTok, when the internet was still the Wild West. And the case grew with it. Maura's story became a kind of living urban legend. A true crime myth. A template for every YouTube rabbit hole, Reddit thread, and Netflix doc that followed. And here's why it won't go away. Because every theory makes sense. And none of them do. It's been 2 decades. No remains. No sightings. No resolution. Maura's family still holds out hope. Her case is still technically active. The New Hampshire Cold Case Unit reviews it periodically. But no arrests have been made. No new evidence has emerged. And in that vacuum of silence, the questions only grow louder. Why do we care so much? Maybe because Maura could have been any of us. Smart. Young. Just days before her disappearance, Maura was caught using a stolen credit card. And then, hours before vanishing, she told her professors she had a family emergency. Spoiler, there was no emergency. Even weirder. She packed her car with snacks, alcohol, and a printed-out map of New Hampshire. She wasn't running away on impulse. She was planning something. And here's the kicker, she withdrew nearly every cent from her bank account, $280. That was her escape fund. Why? Where was she going? And more importantly, who was she running from? To understand Maura's disappearance, you have to understand Maura herself, not just the transcripts and trophies, but the complexity underneath. She wasn't just a nursing student. Before UMass, Mora had attended the United States Military Academy at West Point. Think about that for a second. West Point. One of the most elite, demanding institutions in the country. You don't get in by accident. You don't survive there unless you're smart, focused, and tough. But Mora left after a year. Quietly. No public scandal. No dramatic exit. Just, gone. The official story? She wanted to switch majors and become a nurse. But unofficially, rumors swirled. She allegedly stole makeup from the commissary. Petty theft. A minor incident, but enough to cast a shadow on her spotless record. Enough to prompt a transfer. That's the first crack in the image. And it wouldn't be the last. Now let's fast forward to just days before she vanished. At UMass, Mora and a friend were caught using a stolen credit card number to order food, late-night takeout. The kind of thing that seems stupid and impulsive, especially for someone with her resume. Not exactly Ocean's 11. They used the card to order pizza. Yes, pizza. As in, felony fraud, for pepperoni. Mora admitted guilt, and the charge was likely going to be dismissed after a few months of good behavior. It wasn't going to ruin her life. But it was enough to cause stress. Enough to build pressure. And when you stack it on top of everything else, her recent car crash, her emotional breakdown at work, her sister's relapse, it becomes more than a single bad decision. It becomes a pattern. A descent. On the morning of February 9, 2004, Mora sent emails to her professors. She claimed there had been a death in the family, and she'd be gone for a week. There was no death. No funeral. No family tragedy. So why lie? Let's break it down. She didn't want to attend classes. She didn't want anyone looking for her right away. She wanted time. Space. Privacy. That email wasn't about grief. It was a smoke screen. She was buying time. That suggests planning. Intent. This wasn't some college burnout moment. This was calculated. But calculated, for what? By midday, Mora was preparing for a trip. But it wasn't a spring break getaway or a visit to friends. Here's what she packed. Alcohol, vodka, Bailey's, Kahlua, and boxed wine. A mini liquor store. Snacks, enough for several days on the road. Maps, printed directions to rural destinations in New Hampshire and Vermont. A few clothes. Some toiletries. A stuffed animal. Let that last one sink in. A stuffed animal. That detail always feels out of place. This wasn't someone running from a crime scene. Or charging into a party weekend. It feels childlike. Nostalgic. As if she were trying to take comfort from something familiar. Or someone preparing for a lonely journey, needing something that felt safe. And then, she withdrew $280. Her entire bank balance. That was her escape fund. You don't clean out your account on a whim. You do it because you think, I won't be coming back anytime soon. Earlier that day, she made 2 phone calls that raise even more eyebrows. Call number 1, she contacts a number associated with a condo rental company in Bartlett, New Hampshire. No reservation was made, but she was asking questions. About lodging. In the middle of winter. In a remote, mountainous area. Call number 2, she calls a toll-free number related to booking ski resorts. Again, this isn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. She was planning a trip. She was thinking ahead. And here's what's most important, she didn't tell anyone. Not her boyfriend. Not her friends. Not her father. She left without a word. And that silence? It's deafening. We're left with the question that haunts every investigator, every podcaster, every Reddit thread. What was Mora running from? Let's consider the options. Legal trouble? The credit card incident was small potatoes. A bad relationship? Possibly, but there's no solid proof of abuse. Family drama? Sure, but not enough to vanish completely. Mental health crisis? Maybe. They met at West Point. He was still in the military, stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. By all accounts, they were close. He was concerned when she disappeared. He flew out to join the search. His family supported hers. But years later, rumors surfaced. Emails allegedly showed Bill had cheated on her in the past. A friend claimed Maura was considering ending the relationship. And worst of all, some documents suggest he may have had anger issues. Now to be clear, Bill has never been named a suspect. He cooperated with police. And no one, not the FBI, not the cold case unit, has charged him with anything. But in a case with this many dead ends, people fill in the blanks with suspicion. Fred Murray, Maura's dad, has been her most relentless advocate. From day one, he's challenged the official narrative. He's pressed the police, the media, the government, anyone who'll listen. He believes Maura was the victim of foul play. That she was taken, possibly by someone local. But even Fred admits there are things Maura didn't tell him. Secrets she kept. He says she was under a lot of stress, but nothing that screamed runaway. He still visits the spot where her car was found. Leaves flowers. Talks to her. 2 decades later, he's still searching for his daughter. He never gave up. Now, let's talk about that oddly specific amount, $280. It's not enough to vanish. Not by a long shot. A bus ticket? Sure. A couple nights at a cheap motel? Maybe. But start a new life? No chance. So the question becomes, was she meeting someone? Was $280 just her share? Maybe she thought she'd only be gone for a few days. Or maybe, just maybe, she didn't think she'd need money where she was going. It sounds dramatic. But with Maura, every detail feels loaded. Every item in that car is a potential clue. And none of it adds up. Some of Maura's classmates later admitted she'd become withdrawn in the days before her disappearance. She wasn't herself. She avoided people. She stopped smiling. She seemed distant. But no one sounded the alarm. Why would they? College students vanish into stress all the time. Finals, breakups, bad grades, it all blends together. But in hindsight, that silence was screaming. She was spiraling. And no one saw it in time. So here's a big question, why the White Mountains? Maura had no known friends or family in Haverhill. She wasn't a skier. She wasn't from the area. So why go there? Some theories suggest she'd vacationed in the area with her dad as a kid. She was drawn to the isolation. She was meeting someone nearby. But perhaps the most compelling theory? She chose New Hampshire because no one would follow her there. It was cold. Empty. Remote. The perfect place to disappear. Voluntarily, or not. When Maura left campus that Monday, she didn't blast music or call her best friend. She didn't text goodbye. She didn't even take her favorite clothes. She left with alcohol, a map, and silence. That silence is what's always lingered. No note. No confession. No final text. Not even a, "don't worry about me." Just the sound of tires on a snowy road, and then nothing. Let's lay it all out. Here's the final 48 hours of Maura Murray's known life. Saturday, February 7th, she crashes her dad's car. Minor injuries. Police report filed. Sunday, February 8th, speaks to her boyfriend. Make some odd calls. Seems calm. Monday, February 9th. 1 a.m., she uses her computer. 8 a.m. emails professors about a family emergency. Midday, withdraws $280. Buys liquor. 3:30 p.m., leaves campus. 7:27 p.m., car crashes in Haverhill, New Hampshire. 7:35 p.m., police arrive. Car is empty. Maura is gone. 8 minutes. That's all it took. 8 minutes between the last person to see her alive and the arrival of law enforcement. That 8-minute window has haunted this case for 20 years. By the end of February 2004, Maura's disappearance had made regional headlines. But as the internet caught fire, so did the theories. Podcasts, documentaries, YouTube channels, all trying to solve what police couldn't. Some say she's living under a new name. Some say she was trafficked. Some say she was murdered and buried deep in those woods. But there's one theory no one wants to touch. What if Maura didn't want to be found? It's uncomfortable. Unsolvable. But not impossible. Maura's story is more than a cold case. It's a mirror. We see ourselves in her. Our stress. Our secrets. Our mistakes. She wasn't perfect. She was human. And that's what makes this story so devastating. Because she could have been your sister. Your daughter. Your classmate. Your friend. She could have been you. February 9, 2004. Around 7:25 p.m. A black Saturn sedan crashes. A detail police would later wave off, while internet sleuths screamed, "Sabotage." Here's where it gets chilling. A bus driver had pulled over to help Maura. She declined his help, said she already called AAA. Spoiler alert again, there's no cell service in that area. 10 minutes later, she vanished. She was either picked up, or she disappeared into the woods in sub-zero temperatures. Both scenarios spell danger. One means foul play. The other means hypothermia and death. But either way, the clock was ticking, and Maura was already a ghost. Route 112, also known as the Wild Ammonoosuc Road, winds through northern New Hampshire like a vein through wilderness. On a good day, it's scenic. Picturesque. Quiet. But on a winter night in February? It's cold. Isolated. Almost lifeless. No lights. No traffic. And not much help. That night, visibility was low. The air was sharp enough to burn your lungs. Snow lined the road. And Maura, after driving nearly 3 hours from UMass, was nearly 150 miles from anyone she knew. So when her black 1996 Saturn veered off the road and struck a snowbank, she wasn't in a place where help comes quickly. But here's the strange part. Help came. And she didn't take it. Enter Butch Atwood, a local school bus driver, just finishing his route. As he approached the crash site, he noticed the Saturn lodged in the snowbank. He slowed, pulled up beside it, and saw a young woman, brunette, alone, appearing shaken but uninjured. He asked if she needed help. She said no. She told him she had already called AAA. Now here's the kicker, there was no cell service in the area. 0 bars. Not even a whisper of a signal. So unless Maura had called before the crash, her story didn't make sense. Butch thought it was strange, but didn't press. He drove 100 yards to his home, parked, and called 911 himself. That call was placed at 7:27 p.m. Here's the part that gives every investigator, journalist, and YouTube sleuth insomnia. Between 7:27 p.m. and 7:36 p.m., Maura Murray vanished. That's 8 to 10 minutes. On a freezing night. On a remote road. In the middle of nowhere. When police arrived, they found The car's doors locked. Windshield cracked. Airbags deployed. A box of wine leaking in the back seat. A rag stuffed tightly into the tailpipe. And no sign of Maura. No footprints. No blood. No dropped phone. No purse. No coat. Just silence. The scene looked frozen in time. Like a photograph. Like she had been erased. Now, let's talk about the rag. This wasn't a random piece of fabric tossed in a ditch. It was jammed into the exhaust pipe of the Saturn. Theories exploded immediately. Police theory: it was just an old maintenance trick. Fred Murray, Maura's dad, said he had told her to use it once before to stop the car from smoking. Internet theory: sabotage. Someone intentionally stuffed the rag in to cause the car to stall. Or worse, to fake a breakdown, lure her into stopping, and ambush her. Could Maura have done it herself? Sure. But why would she do that while driving? This is one of those clues that feels either mundane or menacing, depending on which theory you believe. And in a case this cold, everything matters. When Officer Cecil Smith arrived at the scene at 7:46 p.m., Maura was gone. Smith noted. No signs of a struggle. No footprints leading away. No obvious indication of which direction she had gone. Now here's where things get messy. Officer Smith was allegedly driving a different vehicle than the one listed in the police log, a claim that's fueled conspiracy theories about a potential cover-up or misreporting. Some say he was in a sedan. Others say he was in an SUV. The question is, why lie about a detail that small, unless there's something bigger beneath it? And again, no one knows where Maura went in the moments before he arrived. One theory is heartbreakingly simple. She panicked. She ran. And she froze. Maybe she was drinking. Maybe she feared getting arrested. Maybe she thought she could hide for a bit and walk to safety later. The area surrounding the crash site is dense with trees. Steep embankments. Deep woods. It's easy to get lost. Even easier to disappear. But here's what bothers experts. No scent trail. Tracking dogs brought in days later couldn't follow her scent beyond a short distance. No items dropped. No coat. No gloves. No phone. No remains ever found. Not a bone. Not a shoe. Not even a torn piece of fabric. For someone who allegedly died of exposure, she left nothing behind. Now let's examine the darker theory. Maura was abducted. It's possible that someone driving through the area saw her alone, offered help, and she accepted. The chilling part? That person could have arrived within minutes of the bus driver leaving. And that stretch of Route 112 is perfect for a predator. Remote. No cameras. No witnesses. A lone female on the roadside at night. We'd love to believe monsters don't walk our roads. But if one did that night? He didn't leave evidence. In the days following her disappearance, reports trickled in. Someone saw a young woman running along Route 112. A resident claimed a woman matching Maura's description knocked on her door, looking cold and scared. A few said they saw a dark pickup truck parked near the crash site later that night. None of these have ever been verified. And none led to Maura. What makes this case so chilling is not just that Maura disappeared. It's that she disappeared completely. Think about how hard that is in 2004. There were still security cameras, bank records, phone pings. Not as advanced as today, but still enough to track most people. And yet, there's nothing. No digital trail. No paper trail. No confirmed sightings. No remains. No answers. Some locals in Haverhill believe the truth is known by a few, but buried by silence. There are whispers. Of people in town who know something. Of houses that were never searched properly. Of inconsistencies in police logs, reports, and responses. One house, near the crash site, allegedly caused cadaver dogs to hit in the basement years later. But police didn't excavate. To this day, it hasn't been officially searched. Fred Murray has begged them. But nothing's been done. Why? Too little evidence? Or too much risk of finding something no one wants to explain? Here's what we know for sure. At 7:25 p.m., Maura was alive. By 7:46 p.m., she was gone. In that narrow window of time, something irreversible happened. Was it a panic mistake that led to her death? Or a coordinated ambush? Either way, from that moment on, Maura Murray ceased to exist. She became a ghost. A headline. A mystery that refused to fade. There's a concept in true crime called the phantom moment. It's the last confirmed second of someone's life, the final sliver of certainty before the timeline unravels. For Maura, that moment is her conversation with Butch Atwood. He saw her. He spoke to her. She was real. Then, she wasn't. She became the negative space in a photograph. The empty chair. The silence after a dropped call. And 20 years later, we still don't know why. Let's quickly recap the primary theories now that we've walked the scene. She ran into the woods and died. Plausible, but unlikely given no evidence. She was picked up and murdered. Frighteningly possible, with no proof, but also no denial. She staged the crash and vanished willingly. Highly debated. Why crash the car? Why risk death? Police mishandled, or covered up, evidence. Some inconsistencies support this. But no smoking gun. All four are missing one thing. Maura. Every year, thousands of people go missing in the US. But Maura Murray's case endures because it represents the edge of explanation. She was smart. Prepared. Young. Capable. And she vanished in the time it takes to microwave popcorn. That's why we keep coming back. Because if Maura can vanish that easily, so can anyone. When Maura disappeared, the internet was just starting to find its voice. Online forums lit up with theories. And let me tell you, it gets weird fast. Some believe Maura was abducted by a serial killer. Others say she ran off to start a new life in Canada. And then there's the theory that Maura's father knows more than he's saying. Oh, and don't forget, the rag in the tailpipe truthers. Reddit threads. Blogs. YouTube series. TikTok deep dives. Podcasts. Discords. You name it, if it connects to the internet, Maura's name is echoing in it. She became more than a missing person. She became a myth. But here's the cold, hard truth. 20 years later, there's no definitive evidence. No body. No confirmed sightings. No arrests. So how do you solve a case with no leads? And possibly, no crime? That's what's made Maura Murray's case legendary. Everyone has a theory. Everyone has a motive to believe. But no one, not even her family, has closure. In 2004, Facebook was brand new. YouTube didn't exist. Podcasts were barely a thing. And yet, Maura Murray's case was born for the digital age. It started small, message boards like Web Sleuths and the Maura Murray Forum, where strangers became overnight detectives, building timelines, mapping routes, analyzing weather patterns. They dissected everything. The placement of the car. The wording of Maura's emails. The history of Route 112. The timing of the police logs. Even the condition of the rag in the tailpipe. This wasn't just speculation, it was obsession. And for some, it still is. One of the most enduring theories. Maura was the victim of a serial killer. And this isn't just tinfoil hat speculation. There were other missing women in New England in the early 2000s. Some vanished under oddly similar circumstances. Brianna Maitland, for example, just 90 miles away, disappeared a month after Maura. Her car was found abandoned at an odd angle. Driver gone. No trace. Same profile, young, brunette, smart. Some have speculated that a predator was targeting isolated women. Even former FBI profilers have said, this could be the work of a serial offender. But here's the problem, no bodies. No confessions. No matching MO. So while it feels sinister, the evidence doesn't stick. The next theory takes a sharp left turn. Maura staged her disappearance, and is alive today. It's the theory that gets the most pushback, and the most traction. Here's why. She packed maps. She withdrew cash. She told no one where she was going. She vanished in minutes with no trail. Sounds like a plan, doesn't it? Some think she crossed into Canada. Others say she's living off the grid in Quebec, Vermont, or even the Pacific Northwest. There have been sightings. A blurry photo here. A waitress in Ontario who looked just like her. A post on a message board from someone claiming to be her. All of it unconfirmed. But the idea persists because it's one of the only theories where Maura gets to survive. And that hope? It's powerful. Now we step into uncomfortable territory. There are those who believe Maura's own family, particularly her father, Fred Murray, knows more than he said. Why? Some say he was overly involved in the early investigation. Others point to his insistence on certain theories, like abduction. A few cite odd behavior in early interviews, shifting timelines, inconsistent quotes. But let's be clear, Fred has never been a suspect. He's never been charged with anything. He's begged law enforcement to dig deeper. He's walked miles of woods looking for his daughter. Still, when answers are few, people point fingers at those closest to the case. It's not always fair. But in this story, nothing is. Yes. This is real. There's an entire internet subset who focus solely on the rag in the tailpipe. To some, it's the Rosetta Stone of the whole case. A clue planted. A call for help. A signature. Some believe it was Maura herself, trying to sabotage the car so no one would follow her. Others think it was placed there after the crash, to simulate a breakdown or throw off the investigation. A few suggest it was symbolic. A calling card. A cry for help. No matter how you slice it, the rag has become a meme in true crime circles. Because it's one of the few concrete pieces of evidence we have. And it doesn't make any damn sense. Here's the hard reality. No leads have surfaced in over a decade. Searches have turned up nothing. Investigators admit they're still open to all possibilities. And yet, there's no momentum. No progress. Why? Because this may not be a case you can solve with evidence. It may be one of those maddening paradoxes, the absence of clues is the only clue. We don't know if a crime occurred. We don't know if Maura planned it all. We don't know if she died within an hour, or if she's still alive. And law enforcement? They've hit the wall. There's no suspect. No motive. No body. No crime scene. Just a girl. A car. And a vanishing act so perfect, it's legendary. As true crime surged in the 2010s, so did interest in Maura's case. The Disappearance of Maura Murray, a 6-part docuseries on Oxygen, hosted by Maggie Frilling and journalist Art Roderick. Countless YouTube series, including some with millions of views. Podcasts like Missing Maura Murray and True Crime Garage have kept the story alive. But even with all that attention, nothing new has been uncovered. The more lights we shine on this case, the darker it seems to get. Fred Murray is older now. He's given hundreds of interviews. His eyes still carry that haunted urgency. That impossible hope. He believes Maura was taken. That someone out there knows what happened. That this case can still be solved. Her siblings have been quiet. Publicly, they've asked for privacy. Privately, they've been part of every search, every press conference, every agonizing anniversary. They want answers. But what they want more than anything? A place to put flowers. Let's step back. How does a 21-year-old nursing student, with no history of violence or mental illness, no known enemies, no paper trail, no plan to vanish, become the most famous missing person of the internet era? The answer is chillingly simple. She disappeared in a way we can't explain. And when we can't explain something, we mythologize it. She became a ghost in Google results. A face frozen in time. A riddle the internet has collectively vowed to solve. Maura Murray isn't just a person anymore. She's a story. An idea. A symbol of how fragile our lives really are. 20 years. No arrests. No answers. And no peace. But Maura's story lives on because of you. The viewer. The listener. The reader. The believer. You're part of the legacy now. And that's both beautiful and tragic. Because while her story is told over and over, Maura herself is still missing. This isn't just about a cold case. It's about how we respond to the unknown. Do we chase facts or chase closure? Do we seek truth, or just the most satisfying theory? Do we honor Maura by telling her story? Or distort her memory by turning it into entertainment? That's the question we all have to wrestle with. Because Maura wasn't a mystery. She was a person. She had dreams. Fears. People who loved her. And a life that was interrupted mid-sentence. In 2021, nearly 17 years after Maura Murray disappeared, hope stirred once again. A private investigation team, using ground-penetrating radar, detected something anomalous beneath the soil near a home Maura may have walked past the night she vanished. The location? Just off Route 112. It wasn't random. This house had been a focus of suspicion for years. Eyewitness accounts. Rumors. The kind of coincidences you can't ignore forever. The property owner eventually allowed access. Forensics teams moved in. Soil was tested. Equipment deployed. Everyone held their breath. Was this it? After all these years, a body? A trace? A clue? But once again, the answer was silence. Nothing. No bones. No evidence. Just more dirt, more doubt, and another cruel trick from the mystery that refuses to break. Since Maura vanished, the case has grown from a local curiosity to a national enigma, one that has become bigger than itself. There have been 6-episode docuseries. Federal Bureau involvement. At least a dozen major podcasts, each with its own angle, tone, and theory. Thousands of hours of YouTube content, dissecting seconds of security footage and freeze-framing the unseeable. Maura's name trends every February. People post on Reddit as if they knew her. TikTok creators build timelines in 30-second clips. And every comments section reads like a digital seance, calling her back from the void. But no matter how loud we scream into the algorithm, Maura never answers. Even now, 2 decades later, the central theories still circle like vultures around the same questions. 1. She ran away. Maura's life was a pressure cooker. Academic stress. Legal trouble. Romantic turmoil. Family tension. The getaway car. The alcohol. The lies she told to vanish quietly. It all feels plotted. But if she staged her disappearance, she did it flawlessly. No paper trail. No digital slip. No contact with loved ones for 20 years. People don't just disappear that cleanly. Do they? 2. She was taken. A dark road. A vulnerable moment. One wrong stranger. Some theorize she was picked up by a passing motorist. Or worse, someone who knew the area well. But in 20 years, no one's confessed. No remains found. No truck stops. No DNA. No murder weapon. So if foul play occurred, it was surgical. 3. She died that night. Alone. Wearing only light clothes in sub-zero weather, some believe Maura fled the crash scene, possibly panicked or intoxicated, and died in the woods. If that's true, she may be just beyond reach. Just past the tree line. Just beneath the snow. Which begs the cruelest question of all. Did we just miss her? So why does this story stick? Why does Maura Murray occupy a throne in the kingdom of cold cases? Maybe because she was ordinary. A college student. A daughter. Someone who ran track, pulled all-nighters, and cried in dorm stairwells. She could be anyone. She could be us. And that universality makes her absence impossible to ignore. When Maura vanished, we didn't just lose a person, we lost certainty. The idea that the world makes sense. That crimes get solved. That people don't just evaporate without consequence. And in that vacuum, we search. Maura's case is a mirror. And when we stare into it, we don't just see clues and crime scenes. We see the limits of law enforcement. The seduction of unsolved mysteries. The way the internet turns tragedies into puzzles. The thin, cracking ice between justice and voyeurism. And yet, every podcast, every theory, every drone flyover and data dive, is driven by one undying idea. That maybe this time, we'll get it right. That this episode, this clue, this comment, will be the one that cracks it open. But that's the poison and the hope in cases like Maura's. You're always one clue away. And always one clue short. So here we are. 2 decades. Endless hours. A million clicks and comments and conversations. And still. No remains. No confessions. No closure. Was Maura a runaway, looking to erase her past? A victim of foul play who trusted the wrong driver? Or did she succumb to the freezing wilderness, just feet from rescue? We may never know. But her story is a haunting reminder of something bigger. Not every mystery gets solved. Not every person gets found. And sometimes, the scariest thing isn't what we find. It's what we never do. If this story haunted you like it haunted me, hit the like button. Share your theory in the comments, I'll be reading. And don't forget to subscribe for more cases that chill you to the bone. Until next time, stay safe. Stay curious. And never go quiet into the snow.